Welcome, friend, to another journey together. We're so glad to have you here. Tonight, you will find out about 25 amazing Zen stories that hold the secret ways to get deep rest and inner peace, teachings that have guided people looking for freedom for over 1,000 years. If you'd like, feel free to share the time and place you are listening from. I'm about to share with you a special group of hidden knowledge that shows the most secret rules of the old masters. Each story has a strong lesson that can completely change how you feel about worry, not being able to sit still, and the never-ending thoughts that keep you awake at night. These aren't just simple stories to pass the time. They're carefully saved lessons from wise teachers who learned something amazing. That true rest comes not from making the world around us quiet, but from understanding how our own minds work. The Buddha taught us, peace comes from inside you, don't look for it outside. Tonight you'll learn exactly what this old truth means for your own journey to deep rest. As we move through these special teachings, you'll feel something great begin to happen. The heavy feeling of your worries will start to go away. The restless energy that keeps you moving will begin to settle. You'll find yourself naturally moving into a state of deep calmness and peaceful rest. So allow yourself to sink down deep now. Let your whole self relax into whatever is holding you. Take one careful breath with me, and as you let it out, know that you're about to get old knowledge that has been patiently waiting to guide you back home to yourself. Let us now look at a story about the main truth that guides all of life's experiences. This is the teaching of the student who meditates and the smart reminder. A young student had been practicing meditation for several months with real effort. Each morning and evening, he would sit quietly on his cushion, close his eyes, and try to follow the breathing exercises his teacher had shown him. Some days the practice felt easy and calm, but recently he had been struggling with what felt like constant things pulling his attention away and feeling uncomfortable. On this particular morning, he could barely sit still for 5 minutes before he felt very upset. His mind raced with thoughts about work, friends, and many small worries. His legs ached from sitting in a position he wasn't used to, and even though he tried his best to focus on his breath, he found himself constantly pulled away by talking in his head and feeling restless in his body. After what felt like a long time, but was probably only 20 minutes, he gave up on his practice and went to find his meditation teacher. He found the older monk taking care of a small garden behind the meditation hall, peacefully pulling weeds in the early morning sunlight. "Teacher," the student said, his voice full of sadness and judging himself, "my meditation is terrible. I can't focus on anything. I feel so distracted and scattered. My legs hurt all the time, and I keep falling asleep when I'm not distracted. Everything about my practice feels wrong. It's just terrible." The teacher looked up from his gardening, dirt still on his old hands, and met the student's frustrated look with calm, knowing eyes. He listened to the young man's list of complaints without judging or being surprised, as if he had heard these exact same words many times before. "It will pass," the teacher said simply, then returned to his weeding, as if nothing unusual had happened. The student stood there for a moment, a bit confused by the short and seemingly uncaring answer. He had expected detailed advice, maybe a new technique, or at least some words of comfort about his problems. Instead, he received just 3 simple words. Feeling a bit unsatisfied but having nothing more to say, he returned to his room to think deeply about this mystery advice. Over the next few days, the student kept up his practice even though he was frustrated. Slowly, something began to change. The strong feelings pulling his attention away started to go down. His body got used to the sitting position, and moments of true calm began to appear in between the messy thoughts. By the end of the week, his meditation had changed completely. Happy about this good change, he once again looked for his teacher, this time finding him sweeping leaves from the temple courtyard. The student's face shone with excitement and relief. "Teacher," he shouted, "my meditation is amazing now. I feel so aware, so peaceful, so alive during my practice. My mind is clear, my body is comfortable, and I am feeling the most beautiful states of consciousness. Everything about my meditation is just wonderful." The teacher paused in his sweeping, looked at the student with the same calm look he had worn the week before, and gave exactly the same answer. "It will pass." This time, the student heard the deeper lesson. His excitement about his wonderful meditation began to change into something calmer, not disappointment, but understanding. He realized that his teacher was pointing to something main about how all experiences are, not just meditation. Buddha's wisdom tells us, this too will go away. The main idea of this lesson is about understanding that all things change and don't last, both the good and the bad, both the experiences we hold on to and those we try to escape. Why do we fight so hard with the way our experiences keep changing? Zen Buddhism shows that most of our unhappiness comes from our fighting against things changing, our strong tries to hold on to good feelings, and our equally strong tries to get away from bad ones. We tire ourselves out trying to control what we basically can't control. The student's meditation experiences, both terrible and wonderful, were just for a short time. His teacher's same answer pointed to a deeper, steady calm that is there beneath the surface of experience that is always changing. This isn't the steady calm of things never changing, but the steady calm of awareness itself, the space where all changing experiences start and go away. Think about your own relationship with the good times and bad times of daily life. How much energy do you use trying to make good moods, successful times, or comfortable situations last forever? How much do you fight against difficult feelings, challenging periods, or uncomfortable situations? Both the holding on and the fighting against create unnecessary unhappiness. In Zen practice, we learn to develop what you could call staying calm when things change. This doesn't mean you don't care about your experiences or what happens. Instead, it means learning how to stay balanced and able to respond no matter if the current situation is good or bad. The teacher's repeated phrase, "It will pass," gives both comfort and a challenge. It offers comfort during hard times by reminding us that no painful feeling lasts forever. It challenges us during good times by stopping us from building our identity around temporary successes or best experiences. Zen master Suzuki Roshi taught, "Each of you is perfect the way you are, and you can use a little improvement." This puzzling saying points to the same truth the meditation teacher was sharing. We can fully enjoy and take part in our current experience, while at the same time holding it loosely, knowing it will definitely change. Look closely at your own habits of holding on and wanting to avoid. Where in your life are you trying to make last forever what naturally only lasts a short time? Where are you tiring yourself out fighting against situations that will change on their own if you simply let them run their natural course? The Buddha said, "All things that are made change and don't last. Keep working hard and carefully." This teaching invites us to give ourselves completely to life while at the same time holding all outcomes loosely. We can care deeply about our practice, our friends and family, our work, and our growth, while remembering that all forms and experiences are temporary visitors in the space of awareness. This understanding changes how we deal with both good and bad luck, both happiness and pain. Instead of being thrown around by the certain ups and downs of life, we can find our steady calm in the awareness that stays the same while everything else changes. Tonight, as you notice whatever feelings and body states are here, whether comfortable or uncomfortable, good or bad, clear or confused, can you remember the meditation teacher's simple wisdom? Can you hold your current experience fully while at the same time knowing that it, like everything else, will pass? As the Buddha observed, just as the great ocean has one taste, the taste of salt, so also this teaching has one taste, the taste of freedom. The taste of freedom is found not in getting permanent good feelings, but in finding the freedom that comes from dancing gracefully with the nature of existence that is always changing. Let us continue our journey with a story about keeping inner balance no matter what is happening outside. This is the teaching of Master Hakuin and the power of Is that so? Master Hakuin lived in a small village where he was greatly respected for his wisdom, kindness, and great character. For decades, he had kept a reputation as a pure and enlightened teacher, someone who had gone beyond ordinary human weaknesses and showed the highest spiritual ideals. Villagers often brought their problems to him, looking for guidance and inspiration from his teachings and his perfect way of life. In this same village lived a beautiful young woman whose family was well known and respected. When she got pregnant without being married, her situation caused a big problem that spread through the close community. Her parents were very angry and demanded to know who was responsible for bringing such shame upon their family. At first, the young woman refused to say who the father was. She was protecting someone she loved, someone whose reputation and future would be ruined if the truth came out. But as her parents' anger got stronger and the pressure became too much, she made a desperate choice. In a moment of panic and confusion, she pointed to the one person she thought could handle this storm better than her actual lover, the respected Master Hakuin. When her outraged parents faced the Zen master with their daughter's accusation, they expected strong claims of being innocent, explanations, or at least some look of shock at being falsely accused. Instead, Hakuin listened calmly to their angry words and simply replied, "Is that so?" His response only seemed to make their worst suspicions true. Surely an innocent man would defend himself more strongly. The scandal exploded throughout the village. People who had honored Hakuin as a saint now whispered that he was a two-faced person who had been living a lie. His reputation was destroyed right away, and former students left him feeling angry and let down. When the child was born, the parents brought the baby straight to Hakuin. "This is your responsibility now," they declared bitterly. "Since you are the father, you must take care of this child." They pushed the baby into his arms and walked away, leaving him to face the results of a crime he had never done. Again, Hakuin simply said, "Is that so?" and accepted the baby without fighting or explaining. For many months, the former master cared for the child with gentle attention. He fed the baby, changed diapers, walked the floors during nights when the baby wouldn't sleep, and gave all the love and care that any devoted parent would give. Neighbors who had once brought him gifts of food and respect now ignored him or spoke of him with disrespect. He had lost his position, his reputation, and his money. But he kept caring for the child with peaceful dedication. Meanwhile, the young woman struggled with the heavy weight of her lie. Watching the honored teacher suffer for her trick while lovingly caring for a child that wasn't his became too much to bear. The guilt ate at her until she could no longer live with what she had done. Finally, she told the truth to her parents. The real father was a young man in the village whom she had been trying to protect. Her parents were horrified to learn what they had done to an innocent man. They rushed to Hakuin's simple home with many apologies. "Master, we have treated you terribly unfairly," they said, bowing very low. "Our daughter has admitted that you are not the father. We know now that you have suffered unfairly for our mistake. Please forgive us and allow us to take the child back to its real family." Hakuin listened to their apologies with the same calm balance he had shown to their accusations. As he gently placed the baby in their arms, he offered the same answer he had given throughout the entire problem. "Is that so?" As Buddha's wisdom reminds us, hate does not end with hate, but only with love. This is the rule that lasts forever. What we learn from this story is the deep power of keeping inner calm no matter how others see us or what situations life gives us. Why do we let outside events and other people's opinions decide our inner feelings? Zen Buddhism teaches that true freedom comes from growing a solid center that stays steady whether we're being praised or blamed, honored or dishonored, treated fairly or unfairly. Hakuin's response, "Is that so?" represents a deep spiritual practice. He wasn't uncaring or just letting things happen. He was showing the ultimate way to not hold on to reputation, status, and even fairness itself. His same answer showed that his feeling of worth and purpose came from inside him rather than from being approved by others. Think about how differently most of us would react to false accusations, being publicly shamed, and completely losing our good name. The natural human way is to defend ourselves, to fight against unfairness, to demand that others see the truth. But Hakuin's way shows another possibility, meeting all situations with the same peaceful acceptance. This doesn't mean we should never defend ourselves or that we should just accept all unfairness. Hakuin's lesson is more subtle. He shows us that our inner peace doesn't have to depend on outside situations being fair or good. We can keep our balance no matter how the world treats us. The Buddha taught, "You will not be punished for your anger. You will be punished by your anger." Hakuin's calm balance protected him from the extra unhappiness that would have come from anger, feeling sorry for himself, or desperate tries to get back his good name. While the situation was surely very hard, he didn't make the difficulty worse with emotional fighting. Look closely at your own reactions to being criticized, misunderstood, or unfairly treated. How much of your unhappiness comes from the actual events? And how much comes from your thoughts and feelings about those events? Hakuin's example suggests that we have much more control over the second source of unhappiness than the first. Tonight, as you deal with whatever judgments, misunderstandings, or unfair treatments life may bring, can you remember Master Hakuin's peaceful, "Is that so?" Can you find the space between what happens to you and how you answer? Finding that your inner peace does not need to be controlled by outside situations. Buddha's wisdom teaches us peace comes from inside you. Do not look for it outside. True spiritual growth isn't measured by how well life treats us, but by how gracefully we can meet whatever life brings, keeping our kindness, dignity, and inner calm, no matter whether the world recognizes our worth or understands our true nature. As we continue our journey through the wisdom of Zen Buddhism, let us look at a teaching about the short-term nature of all our things and jobs. This is the story of the inn that calls itself a palace. In ancient India, a famous spiritual teacher had spent many years traveling from village to village, sharing the Buddha's teachings with anyone who would listen. His reputation for wisdom and kindness had spread throughout the land, reaching even the ears of kings and nobles. One day during his travels, he arrived at the main city of a great kingdom where a magnificent palace stood above the busy streets, like a crown made of jewels. The palace was truly a wonderful sight. Its walls were built of the finest marble, with precious stones set in them that caught and shone the sunlight in bright streams of color. Gardens filled with special flowers and flowing fountains surrounded the building, and guards in shiny armor stood carefully throughout the grounds. It was clearly the home of someone who had huge wealth and power. The spiritual teacher walked up to the main door with the same quiet dignity he brought to every meeting, whether with kings or beggars. The guards, recognizing him by his simple robes and calm presence, made no move to stop him. News of his arrival had come before him, and they had been told to let him pass. Walking through hallways covered with silk hangings and golden statues, the teacher made his way directly to the throne room, where the king sat upon a specially carved chair raised above the marble floor. Royal people in fine clothes gathered around the throne, their jeweled decorations shining in the light from tall windows. The king, a middle-aged man wearing robes of deep purple silk and a crown of gold and diamonds, looked up as the teacher entered. He had been expecting this visit, though he wasn't entirely sure what to expect from their meeting. "What do you want?" the king asked directly, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to immediate answers and being obeyed without question. The teacher bowed respectfully, but spoke with quiet confidence. "Your Majesty, I would like a place to sleep in this inn." A wave of surprise moved through the people gathered there. The king's eyebrows went up, and his look changed from curiosity to confusion. "But this is not an inn," the king replied, pointing to the rich surroundings. "This is my palace. I am the ruler of this kingdom, and this has been the seat of royal power for generations." The teacher nodded thoughtfully, as if thinking about this information carefully. I see. May I ask your majesty, who owned this palace before you? My father, the king replied, his tone becoming slightly defensive. He ruled here for 30 years before his death. This palace was his seat of power as it is now mine. Ah, the teacher said with true interest. And who owned it before him? My grandfather, the king answered, starting to guess where these questions might lead. He too ruled from this throne. He also is dead. The teacher paused, allowing the weight of these words to settle in the vast throne room. The people around had grown quiet, sensing the deep direction of this unusual conversation. Even the king found himself waiting, almost against his will, for the teacher's response. Finally, the teacher spoke with gentle clarity that seemed to fill every corner of the fancy room. And this place where people live for a short time and then move on, did I hear you say that it is not an inn? The silence that followed was complete. The king sat still on his throne, the teacher's words breaking through layers of assumptions and identity he had never questioned. The courtiers remained frozen, as if seeing something beyond their normal understanding of royal rules and worldly power. The Buddha taught, all things that are made change and don't last. Work out your own freedom carefully. This deep truth is shown in the teacher's strong question about the inn that calls itself a palace. Why do we hold so tightly to things and positions that are by their very nature temporary? Zen Buddhism explains that our holding on to things staying the same creates unhappiness because it goes against the main reality of things changing. Everything we think we own, including our own bodies and who we think we are, we hold only for a short time. Look deeply at your own life. The house you call yours, the car you drive, the job title you carry, the bank account balance you check. All of these are temporary setups. You live in them for a period of time, then move on just as others lived in them before you and will live in them after you. This doesn't mean we should stop caring about our responsibilities or be careless with our possessions. Rather, it invites us to hold them more lightly, recognizing that they are short-term. The king's palace was indeed magnificent and was used for important things, but it was also clearly an inn where people stayed for a short time before leaving. The deeper lesson here shows us how tying who we are to temporary jobs creates unnecessary unhappiness. When we forget that our positions don't last, whether as parent, professional, homeowner, or even student of Zen, we create worry trying to keep what cannot be kept forever. Think about your own things you hold on to. Maybe it's your job identity, your relationships, your health, or your spiritual successes. Each of these is precious and worth caring for, but each is also subject to change. The executive becomes retired, the parent becomes empty nester, the student becomes teacher, the healthy person faces illness. These changes are not failures, but natural examples of things changing. Vietnamese Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh taught, "Thanks to things changing, everything is possible." This teaching changes how we see things changing from something to fear into something to celebrate because nothing lasts forever. Sad feelings can turn into joy, closed hearts can open to love, and even the oldest habits can shift toward wisdom. In Zen practice, we learn to grow what's called non-attachment, caring deeply while holding loosely. This doesn't mean we become cold or uncaring, but that we learn to love without holding on, to work without grabbing, and to enjoy without demanding. It lasts forever. The spiritual teacher's insight cuts through the illusion that any of us are permanent owners of anything. We are all temporary guests in the inn of existence, borrowing our roles and possessions for the brief time we are here. This recognition can bring either deep sadness or great freedom depending on how we take it. Buddha spoke of this when he said, "Everything changes and doesn't last. Try to accomplish as much goodness as possible." This teaching encourages us not to waste our short time in the inn, but to use it wisely, growing love, wisdom, and kindness while we have the chance. Tonight, as you rest in your own temporary home, surrounded by your own temporary things, can you feel the deep freedom that comes with recognizing that they don't last? Can you sense how this recognition might actually increase your appreciation rather than make it smaller? As the Buddha taught, of all footprints that of the elephant is supreme. Similarly, of all meditation topics that on death is supreme. By remembering the temporary nature of our stay in this inn called life, we discover the urgent and precious nature of each moment we're given to practice love and awareness. As we continue our journey through the wisdom of Zen Buddhism, let us look at a story about changing our relationship with unhappiness. This is the tale of the salt and the lake. In a quiet monastery, nestled among rolling hills, there lived an aging master, famous for his patience and wisdom. Among his students was a young apprentice whose heart had become heavy with complaints about life's difficulties. Each morning, the apprentice would arrive with new complaints. "Master, why is life so hard? Yesterday my meditation was disturbed by noise. Today my back aches from the hard floor. When will this unhappiness end?" His voice carried the weight of someone who had kept track of every small discomfort until they had grown into an overwhelming burden. The master listened with unlimited patience. But as days turned to weeks, he realized that words alone would not change his student's perspective. One crisp morning, as golden sunlight streamed through their simple dwelling, the master made an unusual request. "My dear student," he said gently, "I need you to go to the kitchen and bring me some salt. Just a handful will be enough." The apprentice, puzzled by the simple task, nonetheless obeyed. He returned with cupped palms holding coarse white crystals. "Now," the master instructed, taking out a small glass of water. "Place all of that salt into this glass and drink it." The young man hesitated. "Master, that seems like far too much salt for such a small amount of water." "Trust the process," the master replied. "Drink." The apprentice poured the salt into the glass, watching the crystals dissolve into a cloudy, unappetizing mixture. He lifted it to his lips and took a large gulp, immediately making a face as the intensely bitter taste filled his mouth. "How does it taste?" the master asked. "Bitter," the apprentice spat. "Terribly, overwhelmingly bitter. I can barely stand it." The master chuckled softly. "Excellent. Now bring that same amount of salt and come with me." Together they walked in quiet thought until they reached the shores of a clean mountain lake. The water stretched before them like a mirror, reflecting the sky so perfectly that it was difficult to tell where earth ended and heaven began. "Now," the master said, "place this handful of salt into the lake." The apprentice waded into the shallow water and opened his hands, watching as the salt crystals scattered across the lake's surface, quickly dissolving without leaving any visible trace. "Drink from the lake," the master instructed. The young man cupped the lake water in his hands and brought it to his lips. The water was clean, refreshing, with the pure taste of mountain streams. "How does it taste?" the master asked. "Much better," the apprentice replied, truly surprised. "Clean and pure." "Do you taste the salt?" the master inquired gently. The student paused, paying careful attention. "No," he said slowly, "I don't taste any salt at all." The master sat beside his student on a smooth stone at the water's edge. His old hands reached out to gently hold the young man's hands with deep kindness. "My dear student," the master said, "the pain of life is pure salt. No more, no less. The amount of pain in existence stays the same. But the amount of bitterness we experience depends entirely on the container we put that pain into." The apprentice listened with new understanding. "When you are in pain," the master continued, "the only thing you can truly control is your answer. You can choose to be a small glass where every grain of salt makes you feel completely overwhelmed. Or you can choose to make your sense of things bigger, to become like this vast lake where the same salt goes away without harm into something much greater." The master paused. "Stop being a glass, my friend. Become a lake. The Buddha once said, 'Pain is sure to happen. Unhappiness is a choice.' This main teaching shows the heart of our relationship with difficulty. We cannot get rid of the challenges that are a part of being human, but we have huge power over how that pain affects us. What we learn from this story is understanding about awareness itself. Our awareness is not fixed in size. It can shrink into the narrow limits of a glass, where every difficulty looks huge, or it can grow into the wide space of a lake, where the same difficulties become easy to handle. Why do we often choose to be the glass rather than the lake? First is our habit of only seeing the pain becoming so focused on discomfort that it fills our entire awareness. Second is our habit of making up stories, taking a single painful event and creating detailed stories about how unfair life is. Third is the comparing mind measuring our pain against an imaginary standard of how life should be. The lake way of seeing things doesn't make real pain seem smaller or suggest that we should just let things happen. Instead, it offers a smart way to deal with certain challenges that doesn't make them worse with unnecessary unhappiness. From lake awareness, we can answer problems more creatively because we're not overwhelmed. Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh taught, "Thanks to things changing, everything is possible." From the lake way of seeing things, we remember that everything starts and goes away within the vast space of awareness. Today's crisis becomes tomorrow's memory. We become a lake through practices that naturally make our awareness bigger. Meditation teaches us to rest in spacious presence. Thankfulness helps us notice experiences beyond immediate difficulties. Service reminds us that our pain is part of what all humans experience. Tonight, as you think about current challenges, can you feel the difference between experiencing them from glass awareness versus lake awareness? What would it feel like to allow your awareness to grow beyond the immediate strong feeling of difficulties to include the vast context of this moment? As the Buddha taught, if you want to know your mind, sit down and watch it. If your mind is clear, happiness will come. The clarity he speaks of is not the absence of salt, but the spaciousness to hold it skillfully. In becoming lakes rather than glasses, we find that pain can become a door to deeper kindness and freedom. Let us now look at a story about the main truth that guides all of life's experiences. This is the teaching of the student who meditates, and the wise reminder. A young student had been practicing meditation for several months with real effort. Each morning and evening he would sit quietly on his cushion, close his eyes, and try to follow the breathing exercises his teacher had shown him. Some days the practice felt easy and calm, but recently he had been struggling with what felt like constant things pulling his attention away and feeling uncomfortable. On this particular morning, he could barely sit still for 5 minutes before he felt very upset. His mind raced with thoughts about work, friends, and many small worries. His legs ached from sitting in a position he wasn't used to, and even though he tried his best to focus on his breath, he found himself constantly pulled away by talking in his head and feeling restless in his body. After what felt like a long time, but was probably only 20 minutes, he gave up on his practice and went to find his meditation teacher. He found the older monk taking care of a small garden behind the meditation hall, peacefully pulling weeds in the early morning sunlight. "Teacher," the student said, his voice full of sadness and judging himself, "my meditation is terrible. I can't focus on anything. I feel so distracted and scattered. My legs hurt all the time, and I keep falling asleep when I'm not distracted. Everything about my practice feels wrong. It's just terrible." The teacher looked up from his gardening, dirt still on his old hands, and met the student's frustrated look with calm, knowing eyes. He listened to the young man's list of complaints without judging or being surprised, as if he had heard these exact same words many times before. "It will pass," the teacher said simply, then returned to his weeding, as if nothing unusual had happened. The student stood there for a moment, a bit confused by the short and seemingly uncaring answer. He had expected detailed advice, maybe a new technique, or at least some words of comfort about his problems. Instead, he received just 3 simple words. Feeling a bit unsatisfied, but having nothing more to say, he returned to his room to think deeply about this mystery advice. Over the next few days, the student kept up his practice even though he was frustrated. Slowly, something began to change. The strong feelings pulling his attention away started to go down. His body got used to the sitting position, and moments of true calm began to appear in between the messy thoughts. By the end of the week, his meditation had changed completely. Happy about this good change, he once again looked for his teacher, this time finding him sweeping leaves from the temple courtyard. The student's face shone with excitement and relief. "Teacher," he shouted, "my meditation is amazing now. I feel so aware, so peaceful, so alive during my practice. My mind is clear, my body is comfortable, and I am feeling the most beautiful states of consciousness. Everything about my meditation is just wonderful." The teacher paused in his sweeping, looked at the student with the same calm look he had worn the week before, and gave exactly the same answer. "It will pass." This time, the student heard the deeper lesson. His excitement about his wonderful meditation began to change into something calmer, not disappointment, but understanding. He realized that his teacher was pointing to something main about how all experiences are, not just meditation. Buddha's wisdom tells us, this too will go away. The main idea of this lesson is about understanding that all things change and don't last, both the good and the bad, both the experiences we hold on to and those we try to escape. Why do we fight so hard with the way our experiences keep changing? Zen Buddhism shows that most of our unhappiness comes from our fighting against things changing. Our strong tries to hold on to good feelings, and our equally strong tries to get away from bad ones. We tire ourselves out trying to control what we basically can't control. The student's meditation experiences, both terrible and wonderful, were just for a short time. His teacher's same answer pointed to a deeper, steady calm that is there beneath the surface of experience that is always changing. This isn't the steady calm of things never changing, but the steady calm of awareness itself, the space where all changing experiences start and go away. Think about your own relationship with the good times and bad times of daily life. How much energy do you use trying to make good moods, successful times, or comfortable situations last forever? How much do you fight against difficult feelings, challenging periods, or uncomfortable situations? Both the holding on and the fighting against create unnecessary unhappiness. In Zen practice, we learn to develop what you could call staying calm when things change. This doesn't mean you don't care about your experiences or what happens. Instead, it means learning how to stay balanced and able to respond, no matter if the current situation is good or bad. The teacher's repeated phrase, "it will pass," gives both comfort and a challenge. It offers comfort during hard times by reminding us that no painful feeling lasts forever. It challenges us during good times by stopping us from building our identity around temporary successes or best experiences. Zen master Suzuki Roshi taught, "Each of you is perfect the way you are, and you can use a little improvement." This puzzling saying points to the same truth the meditation teacher was sharing. We can fully enjoy and take part in our current experience while at the same time holding it loosely, knowing it will definitely change. Look closely at your own habits of holding on and wanting to avoid. Where in your life are you trying to make last forever what naturally only lasts a short time? Where are you tiring yourself out fighting against situations that will change on their own if you simply let them run their natural course? The Buddha said, "All things that are made change and don't last. Keep working hard and carefully." This teaching invites us to give ourselves completely to life, while at the same time holding all outcomes loosely. We can care deeply about our practice, our friends and family, our work, and our growth, while remembering that all forms and experiences are temporary visitors in the space of awareness. This understanding changes how we deal with both good and bad luck, both happiness and pain. Instead of being thrown around by the certain ups and downs of life, we can find our steady calm in the awareness that stays the same while everything else changes. Tonight, as you notice whatever feelings and body states are here, whether comfortable or uncomfortable, good or bad, clear or confused, Can you remember the meditation teacher's simple wisdom? Can you hold your current experience fully while at the same time knowing that it, like everything else, will pass? As the Buddha observed, just as the great ocean has one taste, the taste of salt, so also this teaching has one taste, the taste of freedom. The taste of freedom is found not in getting permanent good feelings, but in finding the freedom that comes from dancing gracefully with the nature of existence that is always changing. Let us now look at a story about the thin line between heaven and hell inside our own hearts. This is the story of the samurai and the gates. In old Japan, a tough warrior named Nobushige looked for the famous Zen master Hakuin. The samurai's armor had marks from many fights, and his eyes carried the heavy feeling of a man who had seen too much violence. He came to the master's simple home with a question that had been bothering him since his last fight. "Master Hakuin," Nobushige said, bowing stiffly in his heavy armor, "I have spent my life fighting for my lord, facing death many times. Tell me the truth. Is there really a paradise and a hell waiting for us after we die?" Hakuin looked up from his tea, studying the warrior with strong eyes. "Who are you to ask such a question?" he inquired calmly. "I am a samurai," Nobushige replied with pride, straightening his shoulders. "I serve my lord with honor and have never run away from battle." Hakuin's expression suddenly changed to one of disrespect. "You, a soldier," he exclaimed with a mocking laugh. "What kind of ruler would have you as his guard? Look at yourself. Your face looks like that of a regular beggar, worn out and rough. How could someone so unimportant claim to be a protector of noble people?" The words hit Nobushige like actual punches. His face turned red with anger, and his hand quickly moved to the handle of his sword. The insult to his honor was too much. "So you have a sword?" Hakuin continued, his voice full of mockery. "Your weapon is probably much too dull to cut off my head. I doubt you could slice through a thin paper screen, let alone defend anyone important." Unable to stop his rage any longer, Nobushige began to pull out his sword, the steel making a sound as it came out of its case. His whole body shook with fury, his vision focused only on this rude monk who dared to question his honor. At that exact moment, as the blade caught the afternoon light, Hakuin spoke with sudden clarity. "Here! Open the gates of hell!" The words shot through Nobushige's rage like an arrow hitting its target. In that instant, he saw himself clearly, filled with anger, ready to kill over his hurt pride. His mind was clouded by fury. He understood that hell was not some distant place, but the very state he was in at that moment. The samurai's hand froze on his sword as recognition appeared on his face. Slowly, with great respect, Nobushige put his sword away and bowed deeply before the master. His anger changed into deep thankfulness. "Here, open the gates of paradise," Hakuin said gently, his voice now full of kindness. Buddha's wisdom reminds us hate does not end with hate, but only with love. This is the rule that lasts forever. What we learn from this story is a surprising truth about the map of our inner world. Heaven and hell are not distant places, but experiences right now that we create through the feeling of our awareness. Why do we so easily find ourselves at the gates of hell? Zen Buddhism points to the three poisons that cloud our minds: greed, hatred, and delusion. When Nobushige's pride was hurt, hatred appeared instantly, changing a peaceful afternoon into a place of unhappiness. His whole reality shifted from curiosity about the afterlife to deadly rage in just a few moments. The deeper lesson here shows us that we carry inside ourselves the ability for both states. Paradise and hell are not places we go to after death. They are experiences we are in while living. Each moment gives us the choice between the hell of reacting and the paradise of being aware. Think about how often throughout your day similar changes happen. A critical email arrives, and suddenly your peaceful morning becomes a place of worry and anger. Someone cuts you off in traffic, and the wide feeling of your drive shrinks into a tight knot of irritation. A thoughtless comment from a coworker, and your peace disappears into hurt feelings and defensive thoughts. In Zen practice, we learn to recognize these moments of change. Like Nobushige drawing his sword, we learn to catch ourselves at the very moment we're about to enter hell through our reactions. This recognition itself becomes the key that opens the gates of paradise. Zen master Huangbo taught, "The foolish reject what they see, not what they think. The wise reject what they think, not what they see." When we are caught in reacting, we're fighting against the present moment, the master's teaching, the chance for awakening in favor of our thoughts about how things should be. The Buddha said, "Better than 1,000 empty words is one word that brings peace." Hakuin's seemingly rude words were not cruelty, but kindness in disguise. By making Nobushige angry so cleverly, he showed the warrior exactly what he needed to see. That hell is a state of mind we enter through our own choices. This teaching invites us to look at what sets off our own anger. What words or situations instantly take us to hell? Maybe it's feeling unappreciated at work, being misunderstood by family, or facing unexpected challenges. Each of these experiences offers the same choice Nobushige faced. Will we draw our sword or recognize the lesson? Tonight, as you notice irritation starting in response to some frustration, can you remember Hakuin's lesson? Can you recognize the moment when you're about to enter hell through your reactions and instead choose the paradise of awareness? As the Buddha taught, what we think we become. In each moment, we are either opening the gates of hell through unaware reacting or opening the gates of paradise through careful presence. Let us keep going on our journey. The following story shows the difference between helping and holding on. This is the lesson of the two monks and the woman at the river. Two monks were traveling together along a mountain path, making their way to a distant monastery where they planned to continue their studies. Both were very dedicated practitioners who had taken strict promises as part of their spiritual training, including a promise to avoid all touching of women. This wasn't from disrespect, but from their understanding that such discipline helped them stay focused on their spiritual development. As they came to a river that was very full, where the usual bridge had been damaged by recent storms, they met a young woman standing unsurely at the water's edge. The current was strong and dangerous, filled with trash from the mountain runoff, and she was clearly afraid to try crossing alone. "Please, respected monks," she called to them, "could one of you help me cross this dangerous water? I'm not strong enough to make it safely on my own." One of the monks immediately became tense, his mind racing through their monastery rules and the possible problems of this situation. Touching women was clearly forbidden, and he began thinking up reasons for why they couldn't help, perhaps suggestions for other solutions that wouldn't require breaking their vows. The other monk, however, took one look at the woman's difficult situation and the real danger she faced and made a different choice. Without hesitation or long thinking, he walked to her side and gently lifted her onto his shoulders. He carried her carefully across the dangerous current, making sure she was safe with each step, and set her down gently on the far bank. "Thank you so much," she said gratefully, bowing to both monks before continuing on her way. The two monks went on with their journey, but the feeling between them had changed greatly. The first monk walked in increasingly upset silence, his mind churning with thoughts about what he had seen. As the hours passed, his inner tension grew, until finally he could no longer hold back his distress. "Brother," he burst out, unable to keep quiet any longer, "I cannot understand your actions back at the river. Our spiritual training clearly teaches us to avoid any physical contact with women. Yet, you picked that woman up onto your shoulders and carried her across the water. How could you so clearly break our sacred promises?" His companion looked at him with gentle surprise and answered with perfect simplicity, "Brother, I set her down on the other side of the river hours ago, but you are still carrying her." Buddha's wisdom teaches us holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the plan of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. This tale shows the deep difference between acting kindly and mental holding on, between answering present needs and carrying past events. Why do we often carry situations long after they've ended, thinking about them again and keeping alive complaints that only exist in our own minds? Zen Buddhism shows that most of our unhappiness comes not from what happens to us, but from our inability to let go of experiences once they've passed. The first monk's agitation shows how strictly sticking to rules can sometimes go against the kind spirit that originally inspired those rules. His fellow monk saw a person in danger and responded with immediate kindness, then completely let go of the incident. But the first monk carried the event for hours, letting it grow heavier with each step. Think about your own habit of thinking about past conversations, keeping alive old complaints, or mentally practicing situations that have already ended. How much of your mental energy goes toward carrying situations that exist now, only in memory? The woman crossed the river in minutes, but the monk carried her for hours through his own thoughts. This teaching applies to far more than breaking big rules. We carry harsh words someone spoke years ago, mistakes we made decades past, embarrassing moments that no one else even remembers. Meanwhile, the present moment, full of possibilities and real experiences, goes unnoticed because we're too busy carrying ghosts from the past. In Zen practice, we learn to tell the difference between appropriate action and unnecessary holding on. The second monk helped when help was needed, then moved on completely. He didn't worry about whether he'd made the right choice, worry about others' opinions, or think about the incident over and over in his mind. Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh taught, "Thanks to things changing, everything is possible." The river crossing was short-term. It started, served its purpose, and ended. Only the first monks holding on to the event gave it ongoing existence in the form of mental unhappiness. The Buddha said, "Let go of what has passed. Let go of what may come. Let go of what is happening now. Don't try to figure anything out. Don't try to make anything happen. Relax right now and rest." This teaching points directly to the freedom available when we stop carrying experiences beyond their natural lifespan. Look closely at what you might be carrying unnecessarily. Old resentments, past failures, conversations that upset you, decisions you regret. All of these exist now only because you continue to pick them up and carry them. What would it feel like to set them down? The irony is deep. The monk who actually broke the rule experienced no suffering from it, while the monk who kept perfect rule observance created hours of agitation for himself. This shows that unhappiness often comes not from our actions, but from our thoughts about our actions. Tonight, as you notice your mind returning to past events, old complaints, or situations that have already ended, can you remember the wise monk's example? Can you practice setting down whatever you've been carrying unnecessarily, finding the lightness that comes from traveling through life without the burden of yesterday's experiences? As Buddha's wisdom reminds us, in the end, only three things matter: how well we have lived, how well we have loved, how well we have learned to let go. True spiritual practice isn't about perfectly following rules, but about answering correctly to what's actually present, then releasing it completely to make space for whatever comes next. Let us now look at a story about the invisible, heavy things we carry through life. This is the tale of the empty backpack. In a calm monastery garden where morning dew sparkled on carefully kept paths, a young seeker came to his teacher with a question weighing heavily on his heart. His eyes showed both strong will and confusion as he bowed respectfully. "Master," he said, "I want to understand my path on earth better. Why do I seem to carry my past and live it again and again? Why can't I get past my past?" The master studied the young man with kind eyes, then pointed toward a tricky maze made of thin silk panels, shining in the garden's filtered sunlight. "Go forward into the maze," he said, reaching for a leather backpack. "But carry this as you walk. It will help you stay focused. Be careful though, as it is quite heavy. The young man accepted the backpack, initially surprised by how easily the master handed it over. But the moment it settled into his grasp, he gasped. The weight was incredible, forcing him to bend forward as he struggled toward the maze. Inside the silken labyrinth, he immediately ran into solid walls. Through the thin material, he could see other seekers navigating their paths, like distant ghosts. No matter which direction he turned, every path seemed blocked. Exhausted, he sat down to think. Others are clearly ahead of me, he thought. Should I cheat and crawl under the silk? After fighting with these thoughts, he chose to be honest. As he stood with renewed resolve, an opening magically appeared. Progress felt good until he faced another wall. This time, good intentions yielded no results. The backpack's weight became unbearable, cutting into his shoulders. What could be so heavy yet feel so soft? Overcome with curiosity, he removed the pack and looked inside. It was completely empty, yet when he lifted it again, the weight remained undeniable. As he placed it back on his shoulders, a voice whispered clearly, "Look inside of you, young man, for the weight lies there." Suddenly, memories flooded his consciousness. His childhood bullies, accumulated hurts and resentments carried for years. As he lived each painful experience again, the backpack grew heavier. Then understanding dawned. I am the weight. I carry the burden of that which troubles me. With this insight, he began the work of forgiveness. I forgive you wherever you are, he found himself saying. Immediately, the pack lightened, and new pathways opened as sunlight warmed his face, and he remembered moments of love. The weight continued diminishing until the backpack felt weightless. Finally, surrounded by solid silk walls, he sat in meditation. I am the light and the way. I recognized that I was the impediment, not anyone else. At these words, his feet began rising from the earth. He floated above the maze, seeing how others remained trapped by darkness in their own packs. With a thought, he found himself beside his teacher outside the labyrinth. Master, he said, his face shining, I discovered that my darkness caused my weight, and my lightness freed me to fly. The master smiled knowingly. What do you feel, young one? Do you feel freed? Without waiting for an answer, he walked away. Buddha's wisdom reminds us. Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the plan of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. This old teaching shows the deep truth revealed in the empty backpack story. We are the creators of our own heavy loads. What we learn from this tale is recognition that our past does not trap us. Our relationship to our past does. The young seeker discovered that unhappiness came not from what others had done, but from his unwillingness to release those experiences. The empty backpack represents the invisible heavy load of feelings that were never fully dealt with, and wounds that never healed we carry through life. Why do we cling so strongly to our pain? First is our tying who we are to our wounds. We get our identity from complaints thinking, I am someone who was wronged, rather than, I experienced wronging, but I'm not defined by it. Second is our addiction to what is familiar. Even painful emotions become comfortable because they're known. Third is our misunderstanding of forgiveness. Believing it means saying bad behavior is okay, rather than freeing ourselves from the prison of resentment. Think about how this plays out daily. The colleague who received credit for your idea still makes you angry. The parent who criticized you decades ago still influences how you talk to yourself. Each is an invisible item in your backpack weighing you down. Zen teacher Jack Cornfield taught, forgiveness is giving up all hope of having had a different past. We cannot change what happened, but we can change our relationship to what happened. The energy spent keeping alive complaints could be redirected toward creating the life we actually want. The floating represents the lightness available when we release psychological burdens. This isn't about avoiding pain, but dealing with experiences fully and choosing freedom over familiarity. growth over grievance. Tonight, as you prepare for rest, what invisible weight might you be carrying? Perhaps it's time to check what you've been holding on to and ask, does this serve my highest good, or is it time to set it down? As the Buddha taught, you yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. The path to freedom begins with total self-forgiveness and willingness to travel light through life's certain challenges. Let us continue our journey with a story about the power to change things through being fearless and having unconditional kindness. This is the tale of the thief and the Zen master. One quiet evening, as twilight colored the sky in shades of purple and gold, Zen master Shichiri Kojun sat in his simple home, reading old sacred texts. His voice flowed smoothly through the peaceful rooms, each word a meditation, each breath a prayer. The soft light of a candle danced across the walls as he lost himself completely in the sacred texts, finding deep peace in the familiar words. Suddenly, the calmness was broken. The front door burst open with a loud crash, and a desperate man entered, holding up a sharp sword that shone dangerously in the candlelight. His eyes were wild with desperation, his clothes dirty and torn, his breathing heavy from running. He had clearly chosen this lonely house because he believed it would be an easy target. A peaceful monk would offer no resistance. "Money or your life?" the thief demanded, his voice shaking with a mix of fear and aggression. He expected the old man to hide, to beg, to search frantically for whatever valuables he might have hidden away. But Shichiri didn't even look up from his sacred textbook. His voice remained calm and steady as he continued reading for a moment before pausing to address the intruder. "Please don't disturb my practice," he said, with the same gentle tone he might use to ask someone to close a door. "If you need money, help yourself. It's in that drawer over there." He pointed casually toward a simple wooden chest, then immediately returned to his reading as if nothing unusual had occurred. The thief stood frozen, his sword still raised, completely confused. In all his years of stealing, he had never met such a reaction. No fear, no begging, no anger, just simple helpfulness, as if he were a neighbor who had stopped by to borrow something. Shaking his head in confusion, but going on with his business, the thief moved to the indicated drawer and began gathering the coins and small valuables he found there. The soft sound of the master's voice continued behind him, reading sacred words as peacefully as if he were alone. Just as the thief was preparing to leave with his stolen goods, the master's voice called out again. "Wait," Shichiri said, finally looking up from his book. "Please don't take everything. I need some of that money to pay my taxes tomorrow. Leave a little for me, won't you?" The thief stared at him in amazement. Here was a man who was being robbed, calmly discussing the terms of his own robbery as if they were conducting normal business. Almost without thinking, the thief returned some of the money to the drawer. He turned to leave, certain that this strange encounter was finally over. The master's voice stopped him once more. "You took my money," Shichiri called out, his tone carrying a note of disapproval. "And you didn't even thank me. That's quite rude, don't you think?" This final comment left the thief completely speechless. His sword hand began to shake. Never in his most violent encounters had he been so thoroughly unnerved. Here was a man who treated robbery as if it were a favor, who was more concerned about good manners than personal safety. "Thank you," the thief stammered, and then fled into the night as quickly as his legs would carry him. Later, when the thief was caught and admitted to many crimes, including the incident at Shichiri's house, the master was called as a witness. The court officials expected him to demand justice, to describe the terror and violation he had experienced. Instead, Shichiri spoke with the same calm clarity he had shown that evening. "This man did not steal anything from me," he testified. "I gave him the money freely. He even thanked me for it." Though it took a little reminding, the thief sitting in chains felt something break open in his chest as he heard these words. This man had not only shown him extraordinary kindness in the moment of the crime, but was now protecting him from the results. For the first time in years, tears came to his eyes. Not tears of self-pity or anger, but tears of recognition. He had met something he had never experienced before, love without conditions. Upon his release from prison, the former thief looked for the master and begged to become his student. Under Shichiri's patient guidance, he learned to grow the same fearless kindness he had seen that night. Years later, through dedicated practice and the master's steady belief in his potential for change, he reached the deep peace and wisdom of enlightenment. As the Buddha observed, hate does not end with hate, but only with love. This is the rule that lasts forever. What we learn from this story is the power to change things by meeting violence with total peace, answering taking with giving, and answering fear with love. Why do we naturally believe that force must be met with force, that aggression requires a defensive answer? Zen Buddhism shows that this way of doing things, while natural, often makes worse the very conflicts it tries to solve. When we answer hostility with hostility, we simply make the cycle of unhappiness bigger. But when we answer with true kindness, not just giving in, but active love, we create space for change that wouldn't otherwise exist. Look closely at your own experience. When someone comes to you with anger, criticism, or a demand, what is your automatic answer? Most of us immediately get ready to defend ourselves, preparing to protect ourselves through fighting back or pulling away. But notice what happens in your body and mind during these defensive reactions. Does the tension decrease or increase? Does the conflict resolve or intensify? Shichiri's response shows what Zen calls skillful means, acting from wisdom rather than reflex. His fearlessness didn't come from being unaware of danger, but from understanding something deep about the nature of reality. He recognized that the thief's aggression came from desperation and suffering, not from inherent evil. By refusing to see him as an enemy, Shichiri created the possibility for the thief to see himself differently. In Zen practice, we learn to grow what might be called the courage of being undefended. This doesn't mean being naive about genuine danger or letting ourselves be harmed unnecessarily. Rather, it means developing the confidence to respond to difficult situations from our highest wisdom rather than our most basic instincts. The Buddha taught, in the end, just 3 things matter: how well we have lived, how well we have loved, how well we have learned to let go. Shichiri showed all 3 in his encounter with the thief. He lived from complete presence, loved without conditions, and let go of any holding on to his possessions or even his personal safety. Think about the people in your life who challenge you, the difficult co-worker, the critical family member, the aggressive driver in traffic. What would it mean to meet their energy with the same kind of fearless kindness Shichiri showed? Not by agreeing with them or giving in to their demands, but by refusing to match their level of reacting, by staying connected to your own center of peace, no matter their behavior. Tonight, as you encounter your own moments of tension or conflict, can you remember the master who treated a robber as an honored guest? Can you find the space between what happens to you and how you answer where choice lives? Where you can decide to meet aggression with peace, taking with giving, fear with love. Buddha's wisdom reminds us better than 1,000 empty words is one word that brings peace. Sometimes the most powerful answer to violence is simply to remain steady in our commitment to kindness, knowing that love has a power to change things that force can never match. As we continue our journey through the wisdom of Zen Buddhism, let us look at a story about the difference between fighting against and flowing with. This is the teaching of the old man and the waterfall. In a mountain village where a swift river cut its way through old rocks, an old wise Taoist often walked along the water's edge, watching how the flowing current and the solid stones that tried to redirect its path interacted. The villagers knew him as a gentle, thoughtful man who seemed to understand something deep about the natural world that others missed. One afternoon, as storm clouds gathered and rain began to fall, the river swelled with unusual force. The current grew violent and unpredictable, rushing toward a high waterfall that dropped into a rocky gorge below. Most people avoided the area during such conditions, knowing that anyone who fell into the rushing water would face almost certain death against the jagged rocks at the bottom of the falls. The old man, however, had been caught by the sudden storm while walking along his usual path. As he tried to make his way back to safety, the muddy bank gave way beneath his feet. Before he could catch himself, he tumbled into the raging torrent and was immediately swept away by the powerful current. Villagers who saw his fall cried out in horror. They ran along the riverbank, unable to help, watching as the old man was carried toward the waterfall by waters too violent and swift for any rescue attempt. They could only watch in deep pain as he disappeared over the edge, plunging into the churning mess below. Everyone assumed the worst. No one could survive such a fall, especially not an elderly man with limited strength. The villagers got ready to search for his body downstream. Once the waters calmed enough to make such a search possible, but to their amazement, as they hurried toward the base of the waterfall, they saw the old man emerging from the water far below, completely unharmed. He walked calmly to the shore, water streaming from his clothes, and sat down to rest as peacefully as if he had simply taken a refreshing swim on a pleasant day. The villagers rushed to him, unable to believe what they had seen. "How is this possible?" they asked in wonder. "How did you survive that terrible fall? The water was so violent, the rocks so dangerous. By all reason you should have been killed." The old man smiled at their concern and amazement. He wrung water from his sleeves and thought about their question carefully before answering. "I survived," he said simply, "because I adjusted myself to the water, not the water to me. When I felt myself falling, I did not fight against the current or try to force it to change direction. Without thinking, I allowed myself to be shaped by it. When the water wanted to go down, I went down. When it swirled, I swirled with it. Plunging into the whirlpool, I came out with the whirlpool. I became like the water itself, and this is how I survived." The villagers listened in silence, beginning to understand that they had seen something far more than a lucky accident. They had seen a show of a deep principle that the old man had spent years learning from his careful watching of the natural world. As the Buddha taught, nothing is permanent, everything changes, being is always becoming. Here we find the wisdom of working with life's currents, rather than tiring ourselves out in useless fighting against forces we can't control. Why do we naturally fight against difficult situations when flowing and adapting might serve us better? Zen Buddhism shows that our ego mind believes it can control outside situations through sheer willpower. But this approach often creates more unhappiness than the original difficulty. The old man's survival wasn't just luck. It was the result of understanding something essential about the nature of existence itself. When we move with the natural flow of events rather than demanding that life do what we want, we often find resources and possibilities that fighting against makes invisible. Think about your own relationship with challenging situations. How much energy do you use fighting against situations you cannot change? The old man's teaching suggests a different way. Not just giving up, but smart adaptation that keeps our main self while flowing with changing conditions. This doesn't mean accepting harmful situations or giving up our values. The old man didn't give up his desire to survive. He simply changed his strategy for survival. Instead of fighting the water's power, he used it. Instead of resisting its direction, he moved with it while staying aware and focused on his goal. In relationships, careers, and personal challenges, we often face similar choices. We can tire ourselves out trying to force outcomes, control other people's behavior, or make outside situations match our expectations. Or we can learn to work skillfully with what is actually present, finding creative ways to achieve our deeper goals through adjusting rather than force. Zen master Lao Tzu taught, "Water is fluid, soft and yielding, but water will wear away rock which cannot yield and is destroyed." The old man showed this teaching, demonstrating that seeming weakness can be a source of huge strength when used with wisdom. The Buddha said, "Hate does not end with hate, but only by love. This is the rule that lasts forever." This principle goes beyond hate to all forms of fighting against. Problems are rarely solved by fighting against them directly, but by understanding their nature and finding ways to work with the deeper forces involved. Look closely at a current source of stress or conflict in your life. Where are you trying to force the water to change direction rather than learning to swim with it? What would it mean to adjust yourself to the situation while keeping your main values and goals? Tonight, as you encounter the certain currents of daily life, unexpected changes, difficult people, circumstances beyond your control, can you remember the old man's wisdom? Can you find ways to keep your center while flowing with forces you cannot change? Finding that sometimes the most direct path to your goals is the one that seems to go around obstacles rather than through them. Buddha's wisdom reminds us in the end, just three things matter: how well we have lived, how well we have loved, how well we have learned to let go. Learning to flow with life's currents is finally about letting go of our need to control everything while keeping our ability to respond wisely to whatever comes up. Like water, we can be both powerful and yielding, both persistent and adaptive, both strong and gentle. As we continue our journey, let us now look at a story about acceptance and the art of feeling content. This is the shepherd's wisdom. Along a dusty mountain road where wildflowers grew on the hillsides, a tired traveler met a shepherd tending his flock. The morning sun climbed steadily higher, and clouds gathered on the horizon, creating an uncertain sky that could promise either gentle rain or scorching heat. The shepherd sat peacefully on a smooth boulder, watching his sheep graze calmly among wild grasses. His face had the calm look of one who had spent countless seasons under open sky, learning lessons that only nature can teach. There was something in his way of acting, a quality of solid serenity that drew the traveler's attention. "Good morning, friend," the traveler called out, wiping sweat from his brow. "What kind of weather are we going to have today?" The shepherd looked up with eyes that held mountain stream clarity and smiled with genuine warmth. "The kind of weather I like," he replied simply, as if this were the most obvious answer in the world. The traveler paused, confused. He had expected a practical guess that would help him plan his day. Instead, he received what seemed like a circular logic, offering no useful information. "How do you know it will be the kind of weather you like?" the traveler asked, his voice showing frustration mixed with curiosity. The shepherd's smile deepened, and he pointed toward the vast sky above them, where clouds and clear patches moved in their eternal dance. "Having found out, sir, that I cannot always get what I like," he said, with the patience of one who had learned life's most essential lesson, "I have learned to always like what I get, so I am quite sure we will have the kind of weather I like." The traveler stood in silence, the deep simplicity of this wisdom settling into his understanding like seeds finding fertile ground. Here was a man who had found something that all the weather predictions in the world could not provide: complete freedom from the anxiety of uncertainty. As the Buddha observed, holding on is the root of unhappiness. What we learn from this story is the recognition that true contentment comes not from controlling outside situations, but from changing our relationship to whatever situations come up. Why do we tire ourselves out trying to arrange life according to what we want, rather than learning to find peace within whatever life presents? The shepherd represents what Zen calls great acceptance. Not just giving up, but the deep wisdom that recognizes fighting against reality as the main source of unhappiness. When we fight against what is, we create an inner war that drains our energy and stops us from feeling content. When we learn to move with reality as it unfolds, we discover the tremendous peace that comes from swimming with the current rather than against it. Think about how much mental and emotional energy we use each day fighting against situations we can't control. Traffic jams, weather that doesn't match our plans, people who don't behave as we think they should. Each fight creates a small tightening in our awareness, a tiny rebellion against reality that builds up into long-term dissatisfaction. The shepherd's way doesn't mean becoming passive or stopping ourselves from having preferences. We can still hope for sunny days while fully accepting rainy ones. We can work toward goals while finding peace when outcomes are different from expectations. The key lies in holding our preferences loosely rather than allowing them to decide whether we are content. Zen Master Senkan wrote, "The great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences." This doesn't mean getting rid of all desires, but rather not allowing those desires to become demands that reality must fulfill for us to be okay. Look closely at your own habits of fighting against. How often do you find yourself arguing with reality, wishing circumstances were different, or believing you'll be content when things change? This tension is optional, not because you should suppress your desires, but because you can learn to hold them more skillfully. The Buddha taught that holding on doesn't mean caring deeply about things. It means making our inner peace conditional on outside situations arranging themselves according to our specifications. The shepherd cares about his flock and appreciates comfort, but his fundamental contentment doesn't depend on any particular outcome. Tonight, as you think about the day's experiences, both pleasant and challenging, can you find the shepherd's secret within your own awareness? What if contentment isn't waiting for better circumstances, but is available right now through a change in perspective? As the Buddha taught, happiness does not depend on what you have or who you are. It solely relies on what you think. The shepherd discovered that when we stop demanding that life match our expectations, we find the freedom to enjoy life exactly as it presents itself. Let us continue on our journey through the wisdom of Zen Buddhism, with a story about the ghosts we create with our own minds. This is the tale of the haunting that was no haunting at all. A man lived peacefully with his beloved wife for many years. Their love was deep and genuine, their companionship a source of daily joy. But as fate would have it, she became gravely ill. As she lay on her deathbed, her breathing shallow and her strength fading, she grasped her husband's hand with surprising force. "My darling," she whispered, her eyes filled with both love and fear. "I cannot bear the thought of leaving you, and I cannot bear the thought of you loving another. Promise me that when I am gone, you will not see any other women. Promise me you will remain faithful to my memory forever, or I swear I will return from the grave to haunt you." The husband, his heart breaking at her words and her coming death, made the promise she demanded. What else could he do? In that moment of grief and love, he would have agreed to anything to ease her suffering and honor their bond. For several months after her death, the widower kept his word. He avoided social gatherings, declined invitations, and turned away from any possibility of female companionship. His world became small and lonely, filled only with work and memories. But as time passed and the sharpest edge of grief began to soften, he found himself drawn back into the world of the living. It was at a local market that he met her, a kind woman with gentle eyes and a warm smile. Despite his promise to his deceased wife, he found himself drawn to this new person. Conversations led to friendship. Friendship deepened into affection, and eventually, despite his guilt and inner conflict, he fell in love again. The night he and his new love became engaged, his worst fears came true. As he lay in bed, the room suddenly grew cold, and there before him stood the unmistakable figure of his dead wife. Her face was pale with anger, her eyes blazing with accusation. "You have broken your promise to me," she said, her voice carrying the chill of the grave. "You have betrayed our love and dishonored my memory." But what truly terrified the man was not just her appearance, it was her impossible knowledge. Night after night, she would return to torment him, telling again in perfect detail everything that had happened between him and his fiancée. She would repeat their conversations word for word, describe their private moments, reveal their most intimate exchanges. Nothing remained hidden from this ghostly presence. The haunting became so intense that the man could no longer sleep. Dark circles formed under his eyes. His hands shook constantly, and his new relationship began to suffer under the weight of his terror and exhaustion. Desperate for relief, he sought out a Zen master who lived in a small temple near the village. "Master," the man said, his voice trembling as he told his story, "my dead wife's ghost appears to me every night. She knows everything I do, everything I say. She repeats our conversations exactly as they happened. I am being driven to madness." The old master listened carefully, stroking his beard thoughtfully. When the man finished his account, the master smiled knowingly. "This is indeed a very clever ghost," he said. "You should admire such supernatural wisdom, but I will tell you exactly what to do when she appears tonight." That evening, as the room grew cold and the familiar figure materialized, the man followed the master's instructions precisely. "You are truly a wise and all-knowing spirit," he said to the ghost. "You see everything I do and know everything I think. Since you possess such incredible powers and I can hide nothing from you, surely you can answer one simple question for me." "Ask your question," the ghost replied coldly. The man reached down to a large bag of beans that sat near his bedside table. He scooped up a handful and held his closed fist toward the apparition. "Tell me exactly how many beans I am holding in my hand right now." The ghost opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Her form began to move strangely, becoming transparent around the edges. For the first time since her appearances began, she looked unsure, even confused. I cannot," she stammered. And then, like morning mist touched by sunlight, she simply vanished. The ghost never returned again, and the man was finally free to live his life in peace. Buddha's wisdom reminds us, we are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. The deeper lesson here shows us how strongly our minds can create seemingly real experiences from nothing but guilt, fear, and unresolved emotions. Why do we give such power to the ghosts of our own making? Zen Buddhism reveals that most of our unhappiness comes not from outside forces, but from the ghosts we create through our own psychological patterns. The ghost in this story was nothing more than the man's own guilt and fixed way of thinking, sent outside and given form by his tormented mind. Think about how often in your own life you are haunted by voices that seem to know your every move, that judge your every decision, that remind you of promises you've broken or standards you've failed to meet. These inner critics often speak with the voices of people from our past, parents, teachers, former partners, but their power comes entirely from our own minds, giving them substance. The man's ghost could tell his conversations perfectly because it was his own memory playing them back to him. It knew his private moments because it was created by his own awareness. It appeared when his guilt was strongest because guilt was its very substance. The ghost was real in its effects, but had no independent existence. In Zen practice, we learn to tell the difference between what is actually present and what our minds are adding to the situation. The man was genuinely in love with a new person, but his fixed way of thinking told him this was a betrayal. His deceased wife was genuinely gone, but his unprocessed grief and guilt kept her psychologically present. The master's solution was brilliant in its simplicity. By asking the ghost to know something that existed only in the present moment, something the man's own mind couldn't possibly know, he revealed the ghost's true nature. The beans in his hand were unknown even to him until he counted them. No amount of memory, guilt, or psychological projection could provide this information. Zen teacher Charlotte Joko Beck said, "Our thoughts are just thoughts. They're not necessarily true. They're not necessarily important, and they're not necessarily ours." The ghost's accusations felt absolutely real to the man, but they were simply thoughts and emotions given form by his own mental processes. Look deeply at your own experience. What ghosts do you carry that speak with impossible authority about your worth, your choices, your future? Often these voices claim to know things they cannot possibly know, what others really think of you, what will happen if you take risks, whether you deserve happiness or love. The Buddha taught, the mind is everything, what you think you become. When we understand that we are constantly creating our experience through the stories we tell ourselves, we begin to see that we also have the power to question these stories, to test if they are true, to challenge their authority over our lives. Tonight, as you notice the familiar voices of self-doubt, guilt, or fear arising in your mind, can you remember the man and his handful of beans? Can you find the courage to ask these inner critics to prove their supernatural knowledge by answering questions they cannot possibly answer? Can you recognize that the very thoughts that seem to know everything about you actually know far less than they claim? As the Buddha observed, doubt everything, find your own light. The ghosts that haunt us lose their power the moment we stop feeding them with our belief, the moment we see them for what they truly are, not supernatural visits, but creations of our own minds that can be dissolved as easily as they were formed. Now let us look at a story about the patient path to wisdom and the puzzle of urgently looking for something. This is the teaching of the one-eyed student. In a peaceful valley surrounded by cherry trees, a young man had heard stories of a famous Zen master whose students achieved deep understanding through hard practice. Filled with spiritual ambition and eager to change his life, the young seeker traveled many days to reach the master's monastery, his mind burning with determination to reach enlightenment as quickly as possible. When he finally arrived, dusty from the road and bright with enthusiasm, he immediately asked to see the master. The old teacher received him in a simple room overlooking a garden, where monks moved slowly among vegetables and flowers, their movements unhurried and graceful. "Master," the young man said, bowing sincerely, "I have come to study Zen with complete dedication. I am willing to work harder than anyone has ever worked before. Tell me, if I try my best with total diligence and steady effort, how long will it take for me to find Zen?" The master sat quietly for a long moment, watching the young man's eager face, noticing the tension in his shoulders and the urgent energy that came from him. Finally, he replied thoughtfully, 10 years. The student's eyes widened with surprise. 10 years seemed like such a long time when enlightenment felt so urgent, so necessary for his happiness. Surely with the right approach, the process could be sped up. "But master," he said, leaning forward intently, "what if I work very, very hard and really try my best to learn fast? What if I meditate longer than the other students, study more texts, practice more intensely? How long then?" The master thought about this with the same careful attention, then replied calmly, "Well, 20 years. The young man's face showed his confusion and growing frustration. This made no sense at all. How could greater effort result in slower progress? Perhaps the master hadn't understood the depth of his commitment. "But master, I don't think you understand how serious I am about this," he said, his voice getting a little louder with urgency. "What if I really, really work at it? What if I dedicate every waking moment to practice, sleep only when absolutely necessary, and push myself beyond all normal limits? Surely then, I could achieve realization much faster. How long would it take then?" 30 years, the master replied without hesitation. By now the student was completely puzzled and increasingly upset. Nothing the master said made sense according to his understanding of how learning worked. In every other area of life, music, martial arts, studying, harder work produced faster results. Why should spiritual practice be different? "Master, I do not understand," he said, no longer able to hide his disappointment and confusion. "Each time that I say I will work harder, you say it will take me longer. This seems completely backwards. Why do you say that?" The master's expression became gentle and compassionate, like a father explaining something important to a beloved child who was old enough to understand. "When you have one eye on the goal, you only have one eye on the path," the master explained quietly. Ancient Buddhist wisdom tells us, The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. What we learn from this story is a deep teaching about the nature of spiritual progress and the puzzle of seeking with a focus on the goal. Why does intense focus on the goal actually slow down our spiritual development? Zen Buddhism reveals several ways that too much focus on achieving something creates obstacles to understanding. First is the problem of split attention. When part of our awareness is constantly checking progress toward an imagined destination, we cannot fully live in the present moment practices that actually bring about awakening. Think about learning to play a musical instrument. If you spend half your practice time obsessing about when you'll be good enough to perform publicly, that energy isn't available for the careful attention to finger placement, rhythm, and tone that develops skill. The music emerges through complete focus in the present moment relationship between musician and instrument, not through worried looking toward future ability. Second is what Zen calls the gaining mind, the subtle holding on that turns spiritual practice into a trade. When we practice meditation to get enlightenment, study texts to accumulate wisdom, or grow kindness to become better people, we're approaching the path as customers rather than participants. This gaining mind creates a fundamental split between who we think we are now and who we imagine we need to become. The Buddha said, "What you are looking for is where you are looking from." This deep teaching points to the very heart of the Master's lesson. Zen is not something we get, but something we recognize. It's not a destination we reach, but the very awareness with which we walk the path. This ancient wisdom shows why urgently seeking spiritual things often defeats itself. When we're frantically chasing enlightenment, we're acting from the idea that our present experience is somehow not good enough or incomplete. But Zen teaches that the mind that is seeking itself is the very awareness we're seeking to find. Look deeply at your own experience of learning and growth. Haven't your most profound insights often come when you weren't actively trying to have insights? Perhaps while walking in nature, washing dishes, or simply sitting quietly without a plan. These moments of natural awareness show what the Master was pointing toward. That wisdom appears when we stop dividing our attention between here and there, now and then. Zen Master Huangbo taught your everyday mind that is the way. This teaching invites us to look at our relationship to spiritual practice itself. Are we practicing to become someone different? Or are we practicing to recognize who we already are? Are we walking the path to get somewhere else? Or are we finding that the path itself is the destination? The student's mistake wasn't his desire for understanding, but his assumption that it existed somewhere other than in his present moment experience. Each time he suggested working harder, he was actually moving further from the natural awareness that practice reveals. Like trying to catch your own shadow by running faster, the more urgently you chase it, the more it seems to flee. In Zen practice, we grow what's called just sitting. Meditation without a gaining mind, without a plan, without splitting attention between practice and goal. This doesn't mean we become passive or lose our dedication. Instead, we bring complete attention to each moment of practice, allowing insights to emerge naturally rather than forcing them through willful effort. Think about how this teaching might apply to other areas of your life, perhaps in relationships, where trying too hard to be loved often pushes others away, or in creative work, where forcing inspiration typically produces strained results, while relaxed attention allows natural creativity to flow. Tonight, as you notice your mind racing toward imagined destinations, the person you want to become, the peace you want to find, the understanding you want to achieve, can you remember the Master's teaching? Can you gently return both eyes to the path, finding that the journey itself contains everything you thought you were seeking at its end? Buddha spoke of this when he said, "There is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way." By walking the path with undivided attention, we find that what we thought lay at its end was present in every step. Let us now look at a story about a young monk who believed he had failed in his spiritual journey. This is the story of the Golden Wake. At a peaceful monastery overlooking a calm mountain lake, a young student sat feeling sad on the temple steps as the sun began to set toward the water. His shoulders drooped with the weight of disappointment, and his eyes showed the heaviness in his heart. For months, he had struggled with his studies, unable to grasp the deep teachings that seemed to come so naturally to his fellow monks. "The boat is coming to take me home because I have failed in my studies here at the monastery," he said to his teacher, who had quietly approached and sat beside him. "What can I say to my family? They sent me here with such hope, believing I would return as a learned monk who could guide others on the path." The old teacher gazed out at the lake, where a small wooden boat was making its way slowly across the still water. The setting sun colored everything in shades of gold and amber. "Say that you did your best, and that is as much as anyone can do," he answered gently, his voice carrying the wisdom of many years. "But I wanted to be a famous monk and teach others," the boy replied, his voice thick with disappointment. "I dreamed of leading meditation sessions, of having students seek my guidance, of making a real difference in the world." "You can," the teacher said simply. "How?" asked the sad boy, looking at his teacher with confusion. "I couldn't even memorize the basic sacred texts. I fell asleep during meditation. I failed at everything that matters." The teacher smiled and pointed toward the water. "Live from your heart, I will show you. Do you see that boat making its way across the lake with the sun setting behind it?" "Yes," the boy replied, following his teacher's gaze. "Do you see its wake spreading across the lake? See how the boat looks like the tip of a golden triangle as the wake fans out from its front." The boy looked closely, trying to see what his teacher described. "Sort of," said the teacher patiently. "That boat is you as you leave the monastery. The lake is your life. The wake is the effect that you will have on the world. Each ripple causes another ripple, which causes another. By constantly trying to live as wise and loving a life as you can teach the path of love to everyone you meet simply by being yourself. A few of these people will pass on your good example to others. Thus, the expanding golden wake of good actions creates other good actions. Most important, notice how each ripple catches the sun and reflects its light back to heaven." The boy watched in wonder as the simple boat continued its journey, the wake indeed forming an ever-widening triangle of light upon the water. Each small wave caught the golden sunlight and reflected it back toward the sky in countless sparkling points. "Would you come home with me and explain all of this to my father?" asked the boy, hope beginning to start in his voice. Buddha's wisdom reminds us a candle loses nothing by lighting another candle. The deeper teaching here shows us that influence spreads not through grand, noticeable things or perfect knowledge, but through the simple realness of a heart committed to goodness. Why do we believe that only formal papers or recognized achievements qualify us to make a meaningful impact? Zen Buddhism points to our holding on to outside approval and our misunderstanding of how wisdom actually passes from person to person. We imagine that teaching requires a stage, a title, or a certificate, when in reality, the most profound lessons are shared through the feeling of our presence and the honesty of our actions. Think about how often throughout your day you meet people who touch your life not through their expertise, but through their kindness, their patience, or their simple human warmth. The grocery store clerk who greets you with genuine care, the stranger who offers directions with a smile, the friend who listens without judgment. These people create ripples that extend far beyond their awareness. In Zen practice, we grow what might be called unconscious teaching. This is the natural passing on of wisdom that occurs when we match our actions with our deepest values. Like the boat on the lake, we may not see our wake, but it spreads inevitably behind us, touching shores we never knew existed. The Buddha said, "Thousands of candles can be lighted from a single candle, and the life of the candle will not be shortened." Happiness never decreases by being shared. Each moment of authentic living becomes a teaching. Each act of kindness creates ripples. Each choice to answer with wisdom rather than reacting sends light back toward heaven. Tonight, as you think about your own journey, can you see the golden wake you're already creating? Perhaps it's in the patience you show a difficult family member, the encouragement you offer a struggling coworker, or the simple presence you bring to everyday encounters. The light you reflect may be illuminating paths you've never imagined. Let us now look at a story about the nature of identity and the mystery of awareness itself. This is the tale of Zhuangzi and the butterfly. The ancient Taoist sage Zhuangzi lived simply, spending his days in quiet thought of the natural world and the deeper mysteries of existence. He was known for his deep insights into the nature of reality and his ability to see beyond the surface appearances that convince most people they understand the world around them. One afternoon, after a morning of walking through bamboo groves and watching the light on water, Zhuangzi lay down beneath a flowering tree to rest. The gentle warmth of the sun, the soft sound of wind through leaves, and the smell of spring blossoms created the perfect conditions for deep relaxation. As he settled into this peaceful state, his awareness gradually shifted from ordinary waking awareness into the mysterious world of dreams. In his dream, something extraordinary happened. Zhuangzi found himself changed into a beautiful butterfly, his human form completely forgotten. He fluttered gracefully from flower to flower, his delicate wings catching the sunlight as he moved through a world of pure color and sensation. There was no memory of being a philosopher, no awareness of human concerns or intellectual pursuits. He was simply and completely a butterfly, experiencing the world through compound eyes, navigating by instinct, living entirely in the present moment of flight and discovery. The butterfly that was Zhuangzi felt utterly free, unburdened by the heavy thoughts and complex worries that typically occupy human awareness. There was only the joy of movement, the sweetness of nectar, the warm touch of sun on delicate wings. This wasn't a dream about being a butterfly while knowing he was really a man. It was the complete experience of butterfly existence with no trace of human identity remaining. Then, as suddenly as the change had occurred, Zhuangzi awakened. He found himself lying beneath the tree, the afternoon sun having moved across the sky during his sleep. His human body felt solid and familiar. His philosopher's mind immediately active with questions and observations. The vivid dream began to fade as waking awareness returned. But instead of simply dismissing the experience as an unusual dream, Zhuangzi found himself puzzled by a deep question that challenged everything he thought he knew about identity and reality. He sat up slowly, still feeling the lingering sensation of flight, and thought about the meaning of what had just occurred. Was I just now a man dreaming I was a butterfly? He wondered aloud. Or am I perhaps a butterfly now dreaming that I am a man? The question wasn't merely playful guessing. It pointed to something fundamental about the nature of awareness and identity that most people never consider. If the experience of being a butterfly had felt completely real and authentic while it was happening, how could he be certain that his current experience of being human was any more real or permanent? Buddha's wisdom teaches us all, conditioned existence is impermanent. Work out your own freedom carefully. This ancient teaching shows the fluid nature of identity and the importance of not holding too tightly to any particular sense of self. Why do we assume that our current state of awareness represents the ultimate reality? Zen Buddhism points to our habit of taking our present experience as fixed and absolute, when in fact all states of consciousness, waking, dreaming, sleeping, are temporary and constantly changing phenomena arising in the vast space of awareness. Zhuangzi's question challenges our basic assumptions about who and what we are. During the dream, the butterfly identity felt completely authentic and real. Upon waking, the human identity seems equally authentic and real. But which one represents his true nature? Or is perhaps the question itself based on a false starting point? Think about your own experience of identity throughout different states of awareness. Are you the same you when you're dreaming as when you're awake? What about when you're deeply absorbed in an activity, or in deep meditation, or in moments of creative flow when self-consciousness disappears entirely? Which of these states represents your real identity? In Zen practice, we explore the possibility that all these different identities are simply temporary appearances in awareness, like waves on the ocean or clouds in the sky. The waves are real, but they're not separate from the ocean. The clouds are real, but they're not separate from the sky. Similarly, all our various identities and experiences are real, but they're not separate from the underlying awareness in which they appear. The butterfly dream reveals something deep about the nature of transformation and possibility. If Zhuangzi could completely become a butterfly in his dream awareness, what does that suggest about the fixed boundaries we imagine exist around our identity? How solid are the limitations we place on ourselves based on our current circumstances or self-concept? Zen master Dogen taught, to study the way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. Zhuangzi's experience points to this same teaching. The more deeply we investigate the nature of who we are, the more we discover that our fixed ideas about identity begin to dissolve. The Buddha said, "Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form." The man and the butterfly are both real and both empty of permanent independent existence. They are temporary formations in the field of awareness, each authentic while present, each naturally dissolving to make way for whatever comes next. Look deeply at your own sense of identity. How much of who you think you are is based on roles, memories, and concepts that are actually quite fluid and changeable? What would remain if you let go of your attachment to being any particular type of person? Tonight, as you move between waking awareness and the dream state, can you remember Zhuangzi's profound question? Can you hold your identity lightly, recognizing that whether you're experiencing yourself as human or butterfly, worker or dreamer, the awareness in which all these experiences arise remains constant and unbound? As the Buddha observed, everything is impermanent. Keep working hard and carefully. The man dreams of being a butterfly. The butterfly dreams of being a man. But the dreaming itself, the pure capacity for experience, remains as vast and free as the sky, untouched by whatever temporary forms dance within it. Our next story shows the power of returning to what is real when fear threatens to overwhelm us. This is the tale of the captured warrior. In ancient Japan, during a time of constant warfare between rival clans, a skilled warrior found himself on the losing side of a fierce battle. As his comrades fell around him, defeat became inevitable. He was captured by enemy soldiers and dragged away from the battlefield, his armor stripped, his weapons confiscated. That evening, they threw him into a dark, cramped prison cell with stone walls that seemed to press in from all sides. The heavy wooden door slammed shut with a final sound that echoed through his bones. As darkness settled over the prison, the warrior's mind began to race with terrifying possibilities. Tomorrow, they would come for him. He knew the customs of war. First would come the interrogation designed to get information about his lord's defenses, troop movements, and strategic plans. When he refused to speak, as honor demanded, they would resort to torture, hot iron, bamboo splinters under his fingernails, methods he had heard described in quiet voices by other warriors. And when they had gotten what they could, or when they grew tired of his silence, would come the execution. As these thoughts consumed him, his heart began to pound so violently he feared it might burst. His breathing became shallow and rapid. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool night air. Sleep seemed impossible, as his mind created increasingly vivid scenarios of tomorrow's suffering that played repeatedly in his mind like a terrible dream he couldn't escape. Hours passed in this torment. The warrior paced his small cell, sat against the cold stone wall, lay on the straw-covered floor. Nothing brought relief from the visions of impending doom that played repeatedly in his mind. like a terrible dream he couldn't escape. Then, in the depths of his despair, he remembered the gentle voice of his Zen master back at the monastery where he had studied before becoming a warrior. The old teacher's words came to him as clearly as if the master was sitting beside him in the cell. Tomorrow is not real. It is an illusion. The only reality is now. At first, the warrior's frightened mind fought against these words. How could tomorrow be an illusion when the threats were so concrete, so inevitable? But as he sat quietly and allowed the teaching to go deeper, something began to shift. He noticed his breathing. In this moment, he was breathing freely. He felt the straw beneath him, rough but not uncomfortable. He heard the sound of wind moving through the trees outside his window, a sound that spoke of the natural world continuing its ancient rhythms regardless of human conflict. In this moment, he was not being tortured. In this moment, he was not dying. In this moment, there was simply a man sitting in a cell, alive and aware. The terrors that had seemed so overwhelming moments before revealed themselves to be nothing more than thoughts about a future that existed only in his imagination. As this understanding deepened, a profound peace settled over the warrior. His breathing slowed and deepened. His racing heart found a steady rhythm. For the first time since his capture, he smiled. The master's wisdom had freed him from a prison far more confining than the stone walls around him. The prison of anxious thoughts about tomorrow. Within minutes, the warrior fell into a deep, peaceful sleep. The Buddha once said, "If you want to know your past, look at your present condition. If you want to know your future, look at your present actions." This ancient wisdom shows the deep truth the warrior discovered in his cell. The only moment in which we ever actually live is this one. Why do we torment ourselves with endless scenarios about the future? Zen Buddhism explains that our minds developed as ways to survive, constantly scanning for threats and planning for protection. While this ability serves us in real emergencies, it becomes a source of unhappiness when we mistake mental projections for reality. Look deeply at your own experience. How much of your worry comes from vivid imaginings of future scenarios that may never occur? The presentation you're worried about, the medical test results you're awaiting, the difficult conversation you need to have. These situations exist primarily in thought, not in present reality. The warrior's teaching shows us that we can recognize future challenges without being consumed by them. Planning and preparation have their place, but when they turn into obsessive worry, they rob us of peace and clarity. As Vietnamese Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh taught, thanks to things changing, everything is possible. The future remains unwritten, shaped by causes and conditions we cannot fully predict or control. The worried mind assumes that current difficulties will inevitably continue or worsen. But things changing teaches us that everything changes. The warrior in his cell could not know what the next day would actually bring. Perhaps his lord's forces would mount a rescue. Perhaps his captives would show mercy. Perhaps diplomatic negotiations would secure his release. Buddha spoke of this when he said, "The past is gone, the future is not yet here, and there is only one moment for you to live." This teaching doesn't encourage us to ignore future responsibilities or avoid reasonable planning. Instead, it invites us to recognize where our attention usually goes, and to gently guide it back to the richness of present experience. In Zen practice, we grow what's called beginner's mind, approaching each moment with fresh awareness rather than predetermined anxiety. When we truly live in the present, we often discover that it contains resources for peace and clarity that worried thinking never revealed. Think about how the warrior's shift in attention changed his entire experience. The same cell, the same uncertain future. But by returning to present moment awareness, suffering transformed into peace. This transformation is available to us in every moment of anxiety or fear. Tonight, as you notice your mind creating stories about tomorrow's challenges, remember the captured warrior and his master's wisdom. What is actually happening right now? What simple experiences, breathing, sitting, the temperature of the air, are available to anchor you in reality rather than imagination? As the Buddha taught, do not dwell in the past. Do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment. In this teaching lies the key to the warrior's prison and our own. As we continue our journey through the wisdom of Zen Buddhism, let us look at a story about the most fundamental truth that surrounds us, yet remains invisible. This is the tale of the fish and the ocean. In the vast depths of the Pacific, where sunlight filtered down through layers of blue and green, and coral gardens swayed in gentle currents, a young fish swam restlessly through familiar waters. Despite being surrounded by the wonder of ocean life, schools of silver fish moving like liquid metal, sea anemones dancing in the current, and the rhythmic pulse of waves far above, the young fish felt troubled by a constant question. One day, coming near an ancient sea turtle, whose shell bore the scars and wisdom of countless journeys, the young fish asked sincerely, "Elder, I keep hearing other sea creatures talk about something they call the ocean. They speak of it with such respect, as if it's the most important thing in existence. But I've searched everywhere, and I cannot find this ocean anywhere. What exactly is this mysterious thing everyone talks about?" The old turtle's eyes, deep and patient like tidal pools, looked at the young fish with gentle amusement. "Little one," the turtle replied, in a voice worn smooth by decades of storms and calms, "the ocean is this very thing that surrounds you on all sides at every moment." The young fish looked around frantically, darting left and right, swimming up toward the distant surface and down toward the sandy bottom. "But I don't see anything surrounding me. There's nothing here but water and fish and plants and rocks. Where is this ocean you speak of? Why can't I see it?" The turtle settled more comfortably on a bed of soft kelp, understanding that this was a teaching moment that required patience. "Of course you cannot see it, young friend," the turtle explained. "The ocean is both inside and outside of you. You were born in the ocean. You breathe the ocean. You are nourished by the ocean. And one day you will return to the ocean. The ocean flows through your gills and around your body, just as naturally as your own scales cover your skin. It is so much a part of you that it has become invisible." The young fish paused, beginning to sense something vast and fundamental that had been present all along, but remained unnamed. "You mean this water I swim through is the ocean?" "Yes," the turtle confirmed. "You have never been separate from it, not for a single moment of your existence. As the Buddha observed, all conditioned things are impermanent. Keep working hard and carefully." This ancient wisdom shows our relationship with the Tao, the fundamental flow of existence that fills everything, yet remains largely unnoticed in our daily lives. What we learn from this story is a deep teaching about the nature of spiritual blindness. Like the fish who cannot see the ocean, we live immersed in the sacred, but fail to recognize it because it is too close, too constant, too fundamental to our existence to register as separate from ourselves. Why do we struggle to notice the Tao, this universal flow that sustains and surrounds us? Zen Buddhism points to our habit of seeking the extraordinary while overlooking the ordinary. We imagine that spiritual truth must be dramatic, mystical, or separate from everyday experience. We look for God in burning bushes while missing the divine presence in morning coffee, in the breath entering our lungs, in the simple fact of awareness itself. The Tao expresses itself in everything we encounter: the changing seasons, the cycles of sleep and waking, the rhythm of our heartbeat, the way thoughts arise and dissolve in awareness. It is the main idea behind both the spiral of galaxies and the unfurling of fern leaves, the the same pattern expressing itself at every size of existence. Think about how often throughout your day you might catch a glimpse of this underlying flow without recognizing it, the way traffic naturally organizes itself despite having no central controller, the way conversations find their own rhythm and timing, the way your body breathes without conscious direction, the way solutions to problems seem to come from somewhere beyond deliberate thinking. These are all expressions of the Tao working through apparent chaos to create spontaneous order. Zen teacher Alan Watts taught, "Trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth." The Tao is similar. It cannot be grasped or contained because we are expressions of it rather than separate observers of it. Every attempt to understand the Tao through conceptual thinking is like the fish trying to get outside the ocean to examine it objectively. This doesn't mean the Tao is merely a philosophical idea. It is the most practical and immediate reality, the intelligence that coordinates the trillions of cells in your body, the awareness in which all thoughts and sensations appear, the life force that animates everything from redwood trees to bacteria. In Chinese philosophy, the character for Tao literally means the way or the path. But this is not a path we walk towards some distant destination. It is the path that walks itself through us, the way reality unfolds moment by moment without requiring our management or control. Lao Tzu wrote, "The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao." Yet here we are using words to point towards something beyond words. This is the beautiful puzzle of spiritual teaching. We must use the limited to point towards the unlimited, knowing that the finger pointing at the moon is never the moon itself. Tonight, as you feel the breath moving in and out of your body without your conscious control, can you sense the Tao expressing itself through this simple miracle? Can you recognize in this automatic process the same intelligence that moves the planets and changes the seasons? The Buddha taught, "Look within, thou art the Buddha." You are not separate from the ocean of existence any more than a wave is separate from the sea. In recognizing this fundamental non-separation, we stop seeking the Tao and begin living as its conscious expression. Let us now look at a story about the nature of faith and self-doubt. This is the story of the wishing tree. A poor man walked slowly through a dense forest, his shoulders heavy with worry, bills unpaid, relationships strained, dreams delayed. Each step seemed to echo with the weight of his many troubles. The tree canopy above filtered the sunlight into gentle patterns on the forest floor. But he noticed none of this beauty. His mind churned endlessly through his problems, each thought leading to another worry, another reason why his life felt so difficult. Exhausted from walking and thinking, he stopped to rest against what appeared to be an ordinary tree. Its trunk was wide and welcoming, its bark smooth against his back. As he leaned there, catching his breath, he realized how thirsty he had become. "I wish I had something to drink," he murmured to himself. Instantly, as if appearing from thin air, a cup of cool, clear water appeared in his hand. He stared at it in disbelief, turning the cup this way and that, examining it for some trick or illusion. The water looked pure, inviting, tentatively. He brought it to his lips and drank. It was the most refreshing water he had ever tasted, cool and sweet, exactly what his parched throat needed. "That was strange," he said aloud, but his stomach chose that moment to growl with hunger. Almost without thinking, he wished for food. A simple but nourishing meal appeared before him on a wooden plate. Fresh bread, ripe fruit, and vegetables that looked as if they had just been harvested. The smell made his mouth water. He ate slowly, marveling at each bite. "My wishes are being granted," he whispered in amazement. The realization sent a thrill through his entire body. "Well then," he said with growing excitement, "I wish for a beautiful home of my own." Before his eyes, in the meadow just beyond the tree, a magnificent house materialized. It was everything he had ever dreamed of. Spacious rooms filled with light, comfortable furnishings, gardens blooming with flowers. His heart raced with joy as he stood and approached his new home. "If I have such a house," he reasoned, "I'll need help to maintain it." He wished for servants, and immediately several kind-faced people appeared, bowing respectfully and asking how they might serve him. The man laughed with delight, hardly believing his incredible fortune. And what good is a beautiful home without someone special to share it with? He wondered aloud. He wished for a beautiful, loving, intelligent woman to be his companion. A radiant woman appeared beside him, her eyes warm with affection, her smile gentle and knowing. But as she took his hand, something shifted in the man's mind. The rational voice that had whispered doubts throughout his life suddenly grew louder. "Wait a minute," he said, stepping back from the woman. "This is ridiculous. I'm not this lucky. Things like this don't happen to people like me. This can't be real." As the words left his mouth, everything began to fade. The woman's loving smile dissolved first, then the servants, then the beautiful house, and finally even the simple meal he had enjoyed. He found himself alone again, leaning against what now seemed like an ordinary tree with nothing but his original troubles for company. He shook his head knowingly. "I knew it," he muttered, and walked away through the forest. His mind immediately returning to the familiar patterns of worry and complaint that had occupied him before. Buddha's wisdom reminds us we are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. The heart of this lesson lies in understanding the creative power of belief and the self-sabotaging nature of doubt. Why do we so readily dismiss the good that comes into our lives? Zen Buddhism points to a deeply conditioned pattern in the human mind. The tendency to trust our limitations more than our possibilities. We become so familiar with struggle, so identified with our problems that abundance feels foreign, even threatening to our sense of self. Consider how often throughout your day you might receive unexpected kindness, notice surprising beauty, or encounter opportunities that could change your circumstances. How quickly do you dismiss these gifts as coincidence, luck, or too good to be true? This automatic doubt often causes us to literally walk away from the very blessings we've been seeking. The wishing tree represents the responsive universe that Zen teaches us about, reality that mirrors back our deepest beliefs about what we deserve and what's possible. When we approach life with trust and openness, we often discover resources and opportunities that were always available but previously invisible to us. When we approach with cynicism and self-doubt, these same possibilities seem to vanish. The man in the story had access to everything he needed, but his fixed way of thinking told him that someone like him couldn't possibly be worthy of such gifts. His belief in his own limitations became more powerful than the evidence of his senses. This is the tragedy of self-doubt. It causes us to abandon the very solutions to our problems. Zen teacher Suzuki Roshi said, "Each of you is perfect the way you are, and you can use a little improvement." This puzzle points to the balance between accepting our inherent worthiness while remaining open to growth. The man under the tree couldn't hold both truths simultaneously, that he was worthy of good things and that positive change was possible in his life. In our modern context, we encounter wishing trees constantly, the colleague who offers genuine friendship, but we assume they have ulterior motives, the job opportunity that seems perfect, but we convince ourselves we're not qualified, the romantic relationship that feels too good to be true, so we sabotage it before it can disappoint us. Each time we choose familiar limitation over unfamiliar possibility, we walk away from our own wishing tree. The Buddha taught, doubt everything. Find your own light. But there's a crucial difference between the doubt that leads to wisdom and the doubt that leads to self-defeat. Wise doubt questions assumptions and seeks truth. Self-defeating doubt assumes the worst about ourselves and our possibilities, then treats these assumptions as facts. Zen practice invites us to notice when we're dismissing good fortune, abundance, or love simply because it doesn't match our usual story about ourselves. Can we remain open to the possibility that we might be more deserving, more capable, more lovable than our fixed way of thinking suggests? Tonight, as you reflect on the day's experiences, can you identify moments when you might have walked away from your own wishing tree? Perhaps a compliment you dismissed, an opportunity you assumed wasn't meant for you, or a moment of joy you cut short because it felt too good to last. What would it mean to trust in your worthiness to receive life's gifts? As the Buddha observed, thousands of candles can be lighted from a single candle, and the life of the candle will not be shortened. Happiness never decreases by being shared. The wishing tree's magic isn't made smaller by granting wishes. It's fulfilled by them. And our capacity to receive life's blessings isn't made smaller by accepting them. It's made bigger. Let us now look at a story about choice, responsibility, and the power we hold in every moment. This is the tale of the young man and the bird. A clever young student had grown tired of his teacher's seemingly wise answers to every question. He was convinced that the old master simply spoke in riddles to appear profound. And he decided to create a test that would expose what he believed was mere pretense. After thinking for several days, he came up with what he thought was the perfect trap. One morning, the young man caught a small sparrow in the garden. The tiny bird trembled in his cupped hands, its heart beating rapidly against his palms. He held it carefully behind his back as he approached his teacher, who was sitting peacefully in the morning sunlight, reading ancient texts. "Master," the student called out, with barely concealed excitement, "I have a question that will test your legendary wisdom." The old teacher looked up from his reading with patient, gentle eyes. He had seen this look of mischievous confidence in many students over the years, and he understood the young man's need to challenge authority as part of his own growth and learning. "Please," the teacher said simply, "ask your question." The student stepped closer, keeping the bird hidden behind his back. "Master, I hold a small bird in my hands. Using your great wisdom, tell me, is this bird alive or dead?" The young man felt incredibly clever. He had created what he believed was an impossible situation for his teacher. If the master answered alive, he would quickly snap the bird's neck and reveal the dead creature, proving the teacher wrong. If the master answered dead, he would simply open his hands and let the living bird fly away. Again, proving the teacher's lack of true insight. Either way, the student was certain he would expose his teacher's supposed wisdom as nothing more than lucky guessing and philosophical double talk. He waited eagerly for the response that would give him the satisfaction of finally outsmarting the old man. The teacher sat quietly for a long moment, not trying to peek behind the student's back or gather more information. His eyes seemed to look not at the student, but through him, as if perceiving something far deeper than the simple trick being attempted. Finally, with a gentle smile that held both kindness and understanding, the master spoke. "The answer, my young friend, is in your hands." The student stood frozen, his mouth hanging open slightly. In 3 simple words, his elaborate trap had been completely taken apart. The teacher hadn't fallen for either option of the false dilemma. Instead, he had pointed to something far more profound, the fundamental truth that the student himself held the power to determine the outcome. The young man looked down at his hands, still cupped behind his back, feeling the tiny bird's rapid heartbeat against his palms. He realized with startling clarity that the master was right. The bird's fate had never depended on the teacher's answer or supposed wisdom. It had always been entirely in the student's control. More than that, he began to understand that this was true about far more than just this moment. The power to choose life or death, creation or destruction, kindness or cruelty, all of it was always in his hands in every situation, every day. Slowly, the young man brought his hands forward and opened them. The small bird sat still for just a moment, as if gathering itself, then spread its wings and flew into the blue sky, disappearing among the trees. Buddha's wisdom teaches us we are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts, With our thoughts, we make the world. This ancient wisdom shows the deep responsibility that comes with conscious choice and the recognition that we are always the architects of our own experience. Why do we so often look outside ourselves for answers that can only be found within? Zen Buddhism points to our tendency to seek authority figures who will tell us what to do, what to think, what to choose. But the deepest teaching is that true wisdom cannot be given from one person to another. It can only be discovered through our own conscious engagement with life. The student's question seemed to be about the teacher's insight, but it was actually about his own power. He was so focused on proving the master wrong that he almost missed the profound truth being offered, that every moment presents us with choices that shape not only our immediate circumstances, but our character and destiny. Think about your own daily decisions, both large and small. How often do you wait for someone else to tell you what the right choice is? How frequently do you seek permission, approval, or guidance for decisions that ultimately rest entirely in your own hands? The young man's bird represents all the power we hold, but sometimes fail to recognize. In our relationships, careers, and spiritual development, we constantly face moments where we hold something precious in our hands: the well-being of others, our own integrity, opportunities for growth or destruction. The outcome depends not on external circumstances or other people's wisdom, but on what we choose to do with the power we possess. The master's response reveals something crucial about authentic teaching. True teachers don't give answers. They point us back to our own capacity for wisdom. They help us recognize the choices we're already making and the power we already possess, rather than encouraging dependence on their authority. Zen teacher Charlotte Joko Beck said, "We are always in choice, even when we think we're not." The bird in the student's hands represents all the moments when we convince ourselves we have no options, no power, no responsibility. But awareness always involves choice, and choice always involves responsibility. Look deeply at a current challenge in your life. Where are you waiting for someone else to provide answers, solutions, or direction? What would change if you fully recognized that the power to shape the outcome is already in your hands? This doesn't mean you have control over all outside circumstances, but you always have choice about how you respond. The Buddha taught, "The mind is everything. What you think, you become." Every thought, every intention, every action is like the student's choice with the bird, an opportunity to create life or death, beauty or suffering, wisdom or ignorance. The answer is always in our hands. Tonight, as you consider the various situations in your life where you seek guidance or feel powerless, can you sense the truth the Master was pointing to? Can you feel the weight of the choices you carry every day? Not as a burden, but as the fundamental dignity of conscious existence. As the Buddha observed, no one saves us but ourselves. No one can, and no one may. We ourselves must walk the path. The bird flies free not because of the teacher's wisdom, but because of the student's choice. In recognizing our own power to choose life over death, kindness over cruelty, truth over deception, we discover that the answer to every important question has always been in our hands. Let us now look at a story about the courage to trust life's current. This is the story of the Crystal River. In the depths of a great crystal river, where water flowed clear as mountain air, there lived an entire village of small creatures. The river's current moved above them like a gentle breath, carrying the wisdom of countless springs and distant seas. Young and old, rich and poor, all made their home along the sandy bottom, each creature grasping tightly to stones, branches, and roots. For generations, clinging had been their way of survival. Every creature learned from birth to wrap their limbs around river rocks and fallen wood. "Hold on," the elders would say. "The current is dangerous. It will sweep you away to places unknown. Safety lies in staying exactly where you are." But one small creature grew tired of this endless grasping. Day after day, he watched the current flow overhead, seeing how it moved with such purpose and grace. While his neighbors complained about the effort required to maintain their grip, he found himself wondering what it might feel like to trust that flowing water. "I am tired of clinging," he announced one morning. Though I cannot see where it leads, I trust that the current knows its destination. I shall let go and allow it to carry me where it will. For I fear that if I continue clinging, I shall die of boredom before I ever truly live." The other creatures gasped in horror. "Fool!" they cried. "Let go, and that current will tumble you mercilessly across the rocks below. You will be battered and broken, dying far more quickly than any boredom could kill you." But the small creature had made his decision. Taking one last look at his neighbors, he released his grip on the familiar stone. Immediately, the current seized him, and just as the others had predicted, he was tumbled and tossed across the rocky bottom. His small body struck stone after stone, each impact bringing pain he had never experienced while safely clinging. Yet, something remarkable began to happen. As the creature continued to surrender to the current's power, refusing to grab for new anchors despite his pain, the water gradually lifted him higher from the dangerous bottom. The tumbling stopped. The rocks could no longer reach him. Now he flowed with the current itself, no longer fighting its direction, but becoming one with its movement. As he traveled downstream, creatures in distant parts witnessed something they had never seen. Here was one of their own kind. Yet he appeared to be flying through the water, moving with the elegant power of the current itself. "See a miracle," they called out. "A creature like ourselves, yet he soars. Surely he is the Messiah come to save us all." The flowing creature heard their cries and felt kindness for their misunderstanding. "I am no more Messiah than any of you," he called back. "The river delights in lifting us all free, if only we dare to let go. Our true work is not clinging to the bottom, but embracing this voyage, this grand adventure of trust and flow." But the creatures only cried louder, "Savior! Savior!" Even as they spoke, they tightened their grips on rocks and roots. They watched until he disappeared around a bend, then began making up legends about the miraculous savior who had briefly graced their village. Buddha's wisdom reminds us you only lose what you cling to. This ancient teaching shows the deep puzzle at the heart of human experience. We spend our lives grasping for security and control, believing that our safety depends on holding tight to familiar circumstances. Yet in this very grasping, we create the suffering we seek to avoid. Why do we cling so desperately when the current offers to carry us toward unknown adventures? Zen Buddhism reveals that from early childhood we learn the known is safe and the unknown dangerous. This fixed way of thinking becomes a spiritual obstacle when it stops growth beyond familiar limitations. We also suffer from the illusion of control, believing that by grasping circumstances, relationships, and identities, we can stop the natural flow of change. This creates enormous tension because it puts us in opposition to reality itself. Life is constant movement, and when we resist this truth, we tire ourselves out fighting currents far more powerful than our individual will. Consider the areas of your life where you find yourself clinging. Perhaps it's a relationship that has outgrown its original form, a career that no longer brings joy, or an image of yourself that now limits your growth. The current of change will flow whether we resist it or not. Our choice is whether to tire ourselves out in useless opposition or discover the grace available in conscious surrender. The Buddha said, "Nothing is permanent except change." Water doesn't fight the mountainside. It finds the natural pathway down. When we learn to move with life's current rather than against it, we discover effortless effectiveness that rigid resistance can never achieve. Tonight, as you rest in this moment's stillness, what might you be ready to release? Perhaps it's a worry about tomorrow's challenges, a resentment from yesterday's disappointments, or a way of defining yourself that has grown too small. Can you feel into the current of this moment's aliveness and trust its direction? As the Buddha taught, let go of what has passed. Let go of what may come. Let go of what is happening now. Relax right now and rest. In this trust, we discover that the current we feared would destroy us is actually the very force that can carry us home to our true nature. Our next story shows the difference between knowledge and true awareness. This is the tale of the teacher who thought he had arrived. After a decade of intensive training under various masters, studying countless texts, and dedicating himself wholly to Zen practice, a monk named Tenno finally achieved what he had long sought: recognition as a qualified teacher. His understanding of Buddhist philosophy was deep. His meditation practice was deep and stable, and his ability to guide others had been tested and approved. He received the formal acknowledgement that he was ready to teach the Dharma and help others along the path of awakening. Proud of his accomplishment and eager to learn from one of the most renowned masters of his time, Tenno decided to visit the famous Zen master, Nanin. The older teacher's reputation for wisdom and insight was legendary throughout the region, and Tenno looked forward to engaging in deep Dharma discussions and perhaps receiving some final polishing of his understanding. It was a rainy day when Tenno made his pilgrimage to Nanin's temple. The roads were muddy and slippery. Puddles reflected the grey sky, and the steady rainfall required him to carry an umbrella to stay dry. When he reached the temple, he carefully removed his wooden clogs and placed them on the covered porch along with his umbrella, just as custom dictated. He arranged his outer robes, composed himself properly, and entered the temple to meet the great master. Nanin received him graciously, bowing with the respect due to a fellow teacher while keeping the dignity of his greater experience. They sat together in the simple receiving room, and Tenno expected their conversation to focus on sophisticated points of doctrine, subtle aspects of meditation technique, or perhaps the challenges of guiding students. Instead, after the initial pleasantries, Nanin asked what seemed like an absurdly ordinary question. "I noticed you left your wooden clogs and umbrella on the porch when you entered. Tell me, did you place your umbrella to the left of your shoes or to the right?" Tenno was caught completely off guard. Of all the profound topics they could discuss, why was this renowned master asking about such a trivial detail? He tried to recall the moment he had arranged his belongings, but realized with growing dismay that he had no idea. He had been so focused on the importance of this meeting, so busy with the impressive conversation he expected to have, that he had performed the simple act of arranging his belongings in complete unconsciousness. I don't know," Tenno admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. In that moment of confession, the full meaning of his lack of awareness became clear to him. Here he was, a certified teacher of mindfulness and awareness, and he couldn't even remember a simple action he had performed just minutes earlier. Nanin smiled with infinite kindness, not mockery. "Then you have not yet attained full awareness," he said gently. Someone who is truly awake pays complete attention to every moment, every action, every detail of experience. The way you arrange your belongings reflects the same quality of attention you bring to meditation, to teaching, to all of life. In that instant, Tenno's pride in his accomplishments crumbled, replaced by a humbling recognition of how much deeper his practice needed to go. He understood that true awareness isn't something you achieve once and then possess forever. It's a quality of attention that must be cultivated and maintained in every single moment in the most ordinary activities, as well as the most exalted spiritual practices. Without hesitation, Tenno requested to become Nanin's student. For the next 10 years, he studied under the master's guidance, learning to bring the same quality of conscious attention to placing his shoes that he brought to formal meditation, to treat the arrangement of an umbrella with the same reverence he showed to sacred texts. When he finally left Nanin's temple, he was a completely different kind of teacher, one who understood that enlightenment is not a destination, but a way of traveling, not an achievement, but a continuous practice of complete presence. As the Buddha observed, if you want to know your past, look at your present condition. If you want to know your future, look at your present actions. What we learn from this story is the recognition that true spiritual development is measured not by our peak experiences, but by the quality of attention we bring to ordinary moments. Why do we assume that enlightenment exists only in special circumstances, formal practices, or elevated states of awareness? Zen Buddhism teaches that awakening is found precisely in our ability to be fully present for whatever is actually happening, whether it's sitting in meditation or simply placing an umbrella beside our shoes. Tenno's mistake was common among spiritual practitioners. He had developed the ability to be mindful during designated practice periods, but hadn't yet learned to extend that same quality of awareness to everyday activities. He could be present while sitting in meditation, but unconscious while performing simple tasks. This split between spiritual activities and ordinary activities is one of the most subtle traps on the path of awakening. We imagine that consciousness is something we turn on during meditation and turn off during mundane tasks. But true practice integrates awareness into every aspect of life. Think about your own daily routine. How present are you while brushing your teeth, making coffee, or putting on your shoes? Do you perform these activities with the same quality of attention you might bring to more important tasks? The gap between formal practice and informal practice often reveals where our awareness needs to deepen. Zen master Dogen taught, "Practice and enlightenment are one." This means that the quality of awareness we cultivate in any moment is both the path and the destination. There's no separation between developing awareness and being aware. Every moment offers a complete opportunity for awakening. Nanin's question wasn't about umbrellas and shoes. It was about whether Tenno's spiritual development had penetrated into the most basic level of his daily existence. Could he maintain the same presence while performing unconscious habits that he brought to conscious spiritual practice? The Buddha said, "Mindfulness is the path to the deathless. Carelessness is the path to death. Those who are mindful do not die. Those who are careless are as if dead already." True aliveness is found in complete presence. And complete presence can be cultivated in any activity, no matter how simple or ordinary. Look deeply at your own relationship between formal practice and daily life. Where do you treat certain activities as worthy of attention, while others are performed on autopilot? This isn't about becoming obsessively focused on every tiny detail, but about recognizing that the same capacity for presence that serves us in meditation can transform every aspect of our lives. The puzzle is that the most ordinary moments often offer the greatest opportunities for awakening. When we're sitting in formal meditation, we expect to be mindful. But when we're simply arranging our belongings or performing routine tasks, we have a chance to discover whether our practice has truly taken root or remains confined to special circumstances. In Zen temples, students are taught that washing dishes is as sacred as chanting sacred texts, that sweeping floors is as important as studying philosophy. This isn't because these activities are inherently special, but because the quality of awareness we bring to any activity determines its spiritual value. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote, "Washing dishes is not only a way to have clean dishes. Washing dishes is also a way to live fully in each moment." This points to the fundamental teaching that Nanin was offering Tenno. Every action is an opportunity to practice complete presence. The master's question revealed that Tenno's decade of training had developed his capacity for awareness during designated practice periods, but hadn't yet integrated that awareness into the seamless flow of daily life. He could be conscious when he intended to be conscious, but he hadn't yet learned to make consciousness his default state. This integration is what distinguishes genuine spiritual maturity from mere spiritual knowledge. It's relatively easy to be mindful when we remember to be mindful. The deeper practice is developing the kind of natural awareness that operates whether we're thinking about it or not. Tonight, as you perform the simple actions that end your day, brushing your teeth, changing clothes, arranging items for tomorrow, can you bring the same quality of attention you might give to formal meditation? Can you discover whether your spiritual practice has penetrated into the unconscious habits that make up so much of daily life? Buddha's wisdom reminds us every moment is a teacher and every place is a classroom. The umbrella beside the shoes was Tenno's teacher that day, revealing exactly where his practice needed to deepen. Sometimes the most profound lessons come disguised as the most ordinary questions asked by masters, wise enough to see that true awakening is found not in going beyond the ordinary, but in discovering the sacred hidden within it. Tonight, as we come to the end of our time together, can you feel how much calmer you are right now? The peace you're experiencing isn't something far away. It's been inside you all along, just waiting for you to notice it. The Buddha taught us what we think we become. Each story tonight has helped quiet your busy thoughts and reminded you of something simple but powerful, that you don't need to control everything to feel at peace. You just need to let go a little. These 25 stories have all pointed to the same basic truth. Rest comes when you stop fighting with your mind, and clarity appears when you stop trying so hard to figure everything out. The wisdom from tonight is already settling into your thoughts, even if you don't realize it yet, tomorrow. When life gets busy again and your mind starts racing, remember this feeling you have right now. The calm you found tonight will still be there, ready to help you whenever you need it. You don't have to remember every story or study every lesson. Just trust that something good has shifted inside you. These aren't just old tales we've shared. They're practical reminders that peace is always possible, no matter what's happening around you. The understanding you've gained tonight will stay with you, quietly guiding you toward more moments like this one. As you drift off to sleep, know that you already have everything you need to find the same sense of calm again and again. It's not complicated or mysterious. It's as simple as taking a breath and remembering that you're okay, right here, right now. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us on this journey.